Chapter 118. On the first floor of the blood-colored tower, the Yushu clan members were still taking turns to recover their spiritual power. But at this moment a sudden change occurred. A few huge cracks suddenly appeared on the ground, and under the cracks they could vaguely see the endless void. Everyone was startled. Lung Shichi was the same because a crack had appeared beside him. Fortunately he reacted quickly and hurriedly dodged it. Yushu hurriedly said, "Not good, let's go." Everyone no longer cared about recovering their spiritual power and hurriedly ran into the dark passage. When the last person ran in, the ground outside had already shattered. Below them was the void that could swallow everything. Yushu turned around and saw that no one had fallen into the void, so he heaved a sigh of relief. Rumble! Then before everyone could react they felt their bodies shake and the ground under their feet began to gradually rise. Lung Shichi understood that this should be the way to the second floor. After a few seconds the ground under their feet returned to normal, and a spacious circular space appeared in front of them. There was no fog in this space and the place was about 200 to 300 feet in radius. Upon closer inspection, there were all kinds of strange patterns engraved on the walls. Lung Shichi was familiar with these patterns as he had seen many of them in the underground space, and the patterns on the walls were arrays. He immediately reminded everyone, "Be careful, there are arrays here." However, just as he finished speaking, all the arrays on the walls lit up. Immediately, everyone felt a huge suction force pulling them directly to the center of the second floor. After everyone had steadied themselves, wooden puppets walked out of the array formation one after another. These puppets were all humanoid and looked extremely exquisite, much better than the ones they saw in the wetlands. There were exactly 30 puppets. Moreover, these puppets were all different. The one at the front held a shield and an axe, the one at the back held a halberd, and the last one held a bow and arrow. This was like a small combat army. The 30 puppets surrounded everyone in 3 layers. Their originally empty eyes lit up with different colors of light. There weren't many people in the Yushu clan who had fought against humanoid puppets before. Back then, most of them were still in the spirit-gathering realm and were dealing with the lion-shaped puppets and the demonic beast that came later. But even then, they knew that the greatest threat amongst the puppets was the archer puppets. He had to deal with the archer puppet first. However, before they could do anything, the puppets had already pressed down on them. In particular, the 10 archer puppets at the back all pulled out the bows on their backs and fired in unison. 10 sharp arrows flew over. Lung Shichi and Yushu each blocked 2 arrows. The others were already prepared. Those who could dodge and those who could block blocked. After a round of arrows, only 2 of them were slightly injured. Surprisingly, none of them died. However, they weren't happy because the shield axe puppets and halberd-wielding puppets had already surrounded them. The clan members hurriedly went up to fight fiercely. However, this also meant that they couldn't be distracted and constantly guard against the arrows. Thump. Blood is no different stabbed the shield of the shield axe puppet, but it only made a small hole. One had to know that blood is no different was already in the late stage of the pure spirit realm and wielded a second-stage spiritual weapon. Even so, he was unable to cause any substantial damage to the shield axe puppet. This showed how tough these puppets were. At this time, Lung Shichi quickly picked up a few arrows nearby. He raised his hand and shot the arrows at the archer puppet at the back. The arrows divided into 2 groups in midair and shot at the 2 archer puppets. With a few kacha sounds, the arrows accurately hit the archer puppets' eyes. Their heads immediately tilted and they stopped moving. However, at this moment, the remaining 8 archer puppets shot another round of arrows. This time, everyone was too tired to deal with the puppets and had no room to dodge. In an instant, 4 people were killed by the arrows. Fortunately, Lung Shichi and the Yushu clan blocked a few arrows. Otherwise, even more people would have died. Lung Shichi and Yushu looked at each other and knew that they couldn't continue like this. They nodded in tacit understanding and the 2 of them charged at the same shield axe puppet at the same time. Yushu gathered all his spirit force at the tip of his sword. His spirit transformation realm spirit force circulated at full force and instantly pierced through the shield of the shield axe puppet. Then he suddenly slashed downwards. With a ka sound, the shield was directly broken into 2. Lung Shichi followed closely behind. He no longer hid and a long spear appeared in his hand. He let out a roar and a hint of domineering aura appeared from his body. His body moved and the spear shot out like a dragon. An astonishing spiritual light erupted from the tip of the spear, and as it pierced forward, it suddenly transformed into a huge cross-shaped brilliance. This was the formation-breaking cross spear that Lung Shichi had created by fusing the heavy cross spear and the formation-breaking cross spear. The formation-breaking cross spear carried a boundless aura as it rushed into the midst of the puppets, directly piercing towards the puppet whose shield had been split open by Yushu. With a loud ping, the shield axe puppet exploded with a loud bang. The formation-breaking cross spear didn't slow down and continued to smash into the halberd-wielding puppet behind it. The halberd-wielding puppet's defense was far inferior to the shield axe puppet, so a large hole was created by the spear. Yushu followed up with another strike to completely destroy it. The two of them worked together to tear a hole in the puppet. At this moment, the puppets on the side also closed in, but they were all stopped by Hua Lingling and the others. Lung Shiqi didn't dare to delay any longer and quickly rushed toward the archer puppet. Yushu went in another direction. The 8 archer puppets pulled back their bowstrings once, and Lung Shiqi flashed to the side of the puppet. With a gale slash, he chopped it into pieces. At the same time he flicked his arm and threw the spear, destroying another puppet. On the other side, Yushu quickly dealt with an archer puppet. However, 5 arrows were still shot out. Now that there was no Ling Shiqi or the Yushu clan to block the arrows, 3 more people were killed in the blink of an eye. Although the other 2 arrows didn't hit their vitals, the 2 people were surrounded by many puppets and wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Lung Shiqi didn't dare to delay and used his fastest speed to kill 3 archer puppets before the next arrow was shot. The rest were all killed by Yushu. At this moment, all 10 archer puppets were finally destroyed. With these archer puppets dead, the biggest threat was gone and the rest was much easier. Although the shield axe puppets and halberd-wielding puppets were troublesome, they were only troublesome and not dangerous. Then Lung Shiqi and Yushu joined the battle and the battle gradually tilted in favor of the Yushu clan. In the end, after losing 2 more people, they finally destroyed all the puppets. "Is it over?" Yushu asked while panting. "Don't let your guard down. Let's wait and see." Lung Shiqi looked around vigilantly and said. At this moment, Mu-21 suddenly shouted, "There, look over there." When everyone heard this, they turned their heads and saw that a dark tunnel had appeared on the wall not far away. Seeing this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. However, at this moment, many cracks appeared on the ground without warning. They didn't even have time to breathe. Everyone immediately ran towards the tunnel with all their might. Unfortunately, due to the sudden appearance of the crack, there were still 4 people who accidentally fell into the crack. Not even their bones were left behind. Chapter 119. The people who ran into the dark tunnel were all panting with lingering fear. After defeating the puppets this time, they thought that they would have some time to recover, but they didn't expect the ground to split open so quickly, catching everyone off guard. Lung Shiqi looked around and found that there were only 16 people left. Moreover, except for him and Yushu, everyone else was injured. In terms of danger, the second floor was not much more dangerous than the first floor, but the last crack in the ground was impossible to guard against. Feeling the ground under his feet begin to rise again, Lung Shiqi knew that they were going to the 3rd floor. He took advantage of this gap to swallow 2 pills to recover his spiritual energy. After entering the 3rd floor, the environment was similar to the 2nd floor. The only difference was that not only were there arrays engraved on the walls, but even the entire ground was engraved with arrays. Seeing this scene, everyone including Lung Shiqi's heart sank. This floor was probably even more terrifying than the 2nd floor. With heavy hearts, these people walked step by step into the 3rd floor. However, when they reached the center, they didn't see anything happening, nor was there any danger. Lung Shiqi frowned and looked around. He turned his head to say something to Yushu, but when he turned his head, he was stunned. There was no one behind him. The entire 3rd floor was empty, and he was the only one left. Lung Shiqi was shocked, but he immediately calmed down. He knew that the people around him could not disappear in an instant. Thinking about the arrays he saw before, he guessed that it was very likely an illusion. Lung Shiqi closed his eyes and a faint wave of spiritual energy spread out from between his eyebrows. The surrounding environment also changed slightly. The most obvious thing was that the patterns engraved on the walls and ground had disappeared. This meant that he was already in the middle of an array. Lung Shiqi. At this moment, a clear voice came from behind. Lung Shiqi quickly turned around and raised his eyebrows. His expression was a little unnatural as he said, "Delta Origi?" That's right, the person who appeared behind him was a Delta Origi, but Lung Shiqi could tell that this Delta Origi was fake at a glance. Although this Delta Origi was very similar to the real Delta Origi in terms of figure, appearance and temperament, it was not an exaggeration to say that it was exactly the same. However, for some reason this Delta Origi did not look like a real person. This was just like a wax figure or a painting. No matter how lifelike it was or how similar the painting was, a fake was still a fake and could be seen at a glance. Lung Shiqi thought to himself, maybe it's because my spiritual power isn't weak, so I have some resistance to illusions. However, he immediately put on an anxious expression and said, Delta Origi, why are you here? Are you okay? Delta Origi smiled shyly and said, I'm fine. I'm just a little injured. Where are you injured? Let me see. Lung Shiqi's face showed a concerned expression as he quickly walked over. Just as Lung Shiqi was about to touch Delta Origi suddenly raised its hand. Its soft sword suddenly stabbed out dozens of silver snake-like sword shadows. However, Lung Shiqi was even faster. Before Delta Origi stabbed out, his figure changed into 9 phantoms. Each phantom stabbed out with a sword, and at the same time, it was mixed with invisible sword chi. In an instant, the sword light shot out in all directions and the sword chi was everywhere. Whoosh! Lung Shiqi's figure had already appeared behind Delta Origi. Following that, 9 sword rays wrapped in sword chi mercilessly fell. Delta Origi's sword shadows also shattered a few of the sword rays, but more still stabbed into her body. Delta Origi was immediately covered in blood, and half knelt on the ground. Why are you treating me like this? Delta Origi asked sorrowfully. Lung Shiqi was unmoved. He coldly said, a fake is a fake. Delta Origi laughed sadly and said, a fake? Seeing this scene, Lung Shiqi's heart suddenly thumped. He had an ominous feeling. Gusan stood up, and the strange thing was that the injuries on her body had all healed. She continued, that's right, I am indeed a fake. You saw through it a long time ago. This means that either you're very scheming or your spiritual power is very strong. However, although I'm a fake, my heart is real. Lung Shiqi's expression gradually darkened. Delta Origi continued, I'm the manifestation of the obsession in your heart, including your memories and feelings for her. I can even feel her feelings. Why are you telling me this? Lung Shiqi frowned and asked. He could break this illusion at any time, and Delta Origi's words could not shake his mind. However, the feeling of being seen through was not a good feeling. Delta Origi revealed a strange smile and said, it's easy for you to break the illusion, but if you think this is just a small illusion, then you're wrong. We may meet again in the future. Let me ask you one last question. If I'm real, will you do the same to me? This sentence suddenly shocked Lung Shiqi, but in the next moment, Delta Origi, in front of him, disappeared on its own. The surrounding scene also scattered like a burned picture scroll. Lung Shiqi finally returned to the real world. He quickly turned his head and saw that everyone else was standing straight in the same place. Their eyes were full of confusion. Obviously they had all fallen into an illusion. And they were actually still at the place where they had just stepped into this place. It turns out that we've been in an illusion since the moment we entered here. Lung Shiqi murmured with lingering fear. Fortunately, his spiritual power was not weak, so he could break the illusion so easily. Otherwise, thinking of this, Lung Shiqi's heart suddenly tightened. Otherwise, what could he do? Could he really kill the Delta Origi? Thinking of the last sentence of Delta Origi, Lung Shiqi's eyes also showed a look of confusion. But Yushu, who was next to him, suddenly shivered, then sat on the ground and panted heavily. Such a big movement pulled Lung Shiqi's thoughts back. Seeing that Yushu also broke the illusion so quickly, Lung Shiqi was a little surprised. He reached out to help Yushu up. Yushu subconsciously held his hand, but when he looked up and saw that it was Lung Shiqi, he immediately let go. He sat on the ground and quickly moved back. His speed was so fast that it made people speechless. Yushu looked around with a pale face. When he realized that he could see the others, he muttered to himself, "Oh my God, I'm finally out." That was terrifying. Seeing Yushu's reaction, Lung Shiqi's mind turned. He seemed to have guessed something. He walked step by step towards Yushu, narrowed his eyes and asked, "What did you encounter in the illusion?" Chapter 120. Lung Shiqi was wearing a large cloak and a dark force mask. He looked down at Yushu and a shadow covered him. He asked coldly, "What did you encounter in the illusion?" Yushu wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and laughed dryly. Hee, nothing. Then tell me how you got out of the illusion." Lung Shiqi stopped joking and asked seriously. Seeing Lung Shiqi like this, Yushu finally let out a sigh of relief. He thought for a bit and said, "Actually, I'm not very sure. At first, I thought you were really going to." Yushu's expression became a bit unnatural, but Lung Shiqi signaled him to continue. "Cough, I thought you were really going to kill me, so we fought. "Oh Dark Crow bro, you were too strong, I couldn't take it at all. Then you suddenly used the half-moon sword glint. I thought I was going to be killed, but I didn't expect the half-moon sword glint to hit himself. Then I came out." Hearing this, Lung Shichi nodded thoughtfully. If what the Delta Origi said was true, then the Lung Shichi Yushu encountered in the illusion had the memories of Lung Shichi in his mind. However, the half-moon rapid light slash was a move that Lung Shichi had fused 3 spiritual skills together. It was an ultimate move that he had comprehended when he was at his limit. It wasn't something that could be used with just a bit of memory. So it was possible that the Lung Shichi in Yushu's illusion was counterattacked by this move. But Lung Shichi didn't know whether to laugh or cry at how Yushu escaped the illusion. Yushu looked at the others standing there in a daze. He sighed and said, I didn't expect this level to be an illusion. I don't know how many people can wake up." He wanted to help others, but he himself had somehow gotten rid of the illusion. He had no idea how to do so, so he could only helplessly help. Although Lung Shichi's spiritual power wasn't weak, it was his first time coming into contact with something like an illusion. He couldn't think of any good ideas for the time being and felt a little helpless. He could only helplessly say, "They can only rely on themselves." Just as he finished speaking, another 2 people broke free from the illusion and slumped to the ground. He turned his head and saw that it was Mu-21 and blood is no different. At this time the 2 of them were soaked in cold sweat. Lung Shichi and Yushu hurried forward to help them up and asked. However, they never expected that the person they met in the illusion was actually Lung Shichi as well. And the results were similar to Yushu's. Lung Shichi inexplicably committed suicide in the end. Yushu finally felt better at this time. He thought to himself, so I'm not the only one who was traumatized by Lung Shichi. Lung Shichi really didn't know what to say. He could only recover his spiritual power while thinking of ways to help others get rid of the illusion. At the same time, he waited for others to wake up. Gradually, a few people broke free from the illusion, but the ground began to crack and collapse again. The speed of the collapse wasn't fast, but there wasn't much time left for them. Lung Shichi recovered his spiritual power and opened his eyes. He saw Yushu anxiously looking around and glancing at someone from time to time. That person was Hua Lingling. She was still immersed in the illusion. Seeing that there were more and more cracks on the ground, Yushu became more and more anxious. Lung Shichi also thought of an immature idea in the process of recovering his spiritual power, so he said to Yushu, "I have a method that might be able to try, but I've never done it before, so the hope is not great. If we're not careful, it might even cause Hua Lingling to have a mental breakdown and die." Yushu's face showed some hesitation. Hua Lingling joined him when he first established the Yushu clan. She had been with him for the longest time. And after she broke through to the pure spirit realm, many things in the clan were taken care of by her. It could be said that she had helped Yushu a lot inside and outside. There was both merit and hard work. Yushu really couldn't bear to watch Hua Lingling die here. Even if there was only a glimmer of hope, he wanted to grasp it. In the end, he gritted his teeth and said, "Let's try it." Lung Shichi nodded and walked to Hua Lingling. Then he opened his eyes slightly, and an invisible mental power spread out from between his eyebrows and poured into Hua Lingling's forehead. He was planning to use his mental power to directly attack Hua Lingling's spiritual world. When Hua Lingling was trapped in the illusion, such a violent method was indeed likely to cause her to have a mental breakdown, but this was the only way because there was almost no time. Hua Lingling let out a muffled groan as a painful expression appeared on her face. Beads of sweat appeared on her cheeks. At this time, blood is no different and the others had already run into the black passage. He hurriedly shouted, "Hurry up, this place is going to collapse soon." Seeing that Hua Lingling was still unconscious, Lung Shichi sighed inwardly and turned to enter the black passage. But at this moment, Hua Lingling suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and opened her eyes. However, her eyes were unfocused and lifeless. Yushu was quick to react. He hurriedly hugged Hua Lingling, who was about to fall, and quickly ran into the black passage. When the 3 of them entered, the space on the 3rd floor completely collapsed. Yushu said gratefully, "Brother Dark Crow, thank you." Lung Shichi's gaze drifted back and forth between Yushu and Hua Lingling, revealing a meaningful look. Yushu's face turned red. He coughed dryly and changed the topic. "How many people are left?" Mu Shiching, blood is no different, and the others opened their mouths but still did not speak. Yushu turned around. He did not need to count. He could tell at a glance that including himself, there were only 9 people left. 9 people. There were only a single digit left. The illusory array on the 3rd floor took away the lives of 7 people without shedding a single drop of blood. What was even more terrifying was that there were still 2 more floors below. Could the 9 of them make it through? Even Leng Shiqi could not help but feel a little nervous. However, he was still confident because so far, at least they had not encountered any life-threatening danger. Not long after, the 9 of them finally arrived at the 4th floor. The space on the 4th floor seemed to be smaller than the 3rd floor. What was different was that there were 4 floating stone platforms in the center of the 4th floor. The stone platforms were not big and could only accommodate 1 person standing on them. Leng Shiqi and the others stepped into the 4th floor. They were all cautious and vigilant, but after a while there was still no danger. Could it be another illusory array? Blood is no different, asked, puzzled. Yushu walked to the 4 stone platforms with a thoughtful look. He said, "It's not an illusory array. The test on this floor might be related to these 4 stone platforms." Leng Shiqi looked at the 4 stone platforms and had some guesses. He said, "That's right. If I'm not wrong, only 4 people can pass this floor." Chapter 121. After Leng Shiqi finished speaking, everyone looked at the 4 stone platforms with eager gazes. Perhaps to prove that Leng Shiqi was right, the stone platforms suddenly released a ray of light and then disappeared. Immediately after, the stone platforms began to slowly rise. Although the rise was very slow, it would only take another incense stick of time for it to rise to a height they couldn't reach even if they jumped. This meant that the 9 people present would have to kill each other to compete for the 4 spots. And they didn't have much time. They were all very smart people and quickly understood the meaning behind this. They looked at each other in dismay. They had fought side by side for a long time, and now they were about to kill each other. This was a bit difficult for them to accept. However, in the face of the great terror of life and death, no one would choose death. Their gazes gradually changed. They no longer trusted or cared for him. Instead, cold killing intent slowly emerged. At this moment, Leng Shiqi moved and stood on a stone platform in the blink of an eye. He slowly pulled out his blade and his aura continued to rise, giving off bursts of powerful aura. Spirit Transformation Realm. The expressions of the others changed. They originally thought that this vice leader was only at the peak of the pure spirit realm and still had a trace of fantasy in their hearts. However, at this moment they completely destroyed this fantasy. They were not a match for Dark Crow. Yushu's expression was very calm. When Leng Shiqi attacked on the 1st floor, he had noticed Leng Shiqi's cultivation, so he wasn't surprised. Moreover, Yushu could also guess that the reason why Leng Shiqi revealed his cultivation at this moment was because he didn't want to fight with everyone and let them back off. Then Yushu also circulated his spirit force and erupted with the spirit pressure of the spirit transformation realm. No one dared to stop him. Standing on the stone platform, Yushu looked at everyone. When he saw the hidden killing intent in their eyes, Yushu's heart turned cold. But when he saw Hua Lingling, his heart softened again. At this time, Hua Lingling had just regained her consciousness and was still a little weak. She definitely could not exert her full strength. If she were to fight with someone else, her chances of survival would be slim. As if she had seen through Yushu's thoughts, Hua Lingling smiled gently and said, "Let me fight. No matter what the outcome is, I have no regrets." Yushu didn't say anything. Instead, he slowly closed his eyes. He didn't want to see his own people killing each other. This was like a signal, and soon after, the 7 of them began to fight. Leng Shiqi, on the other hand, had been watching their battles. Among the 7 of them, he was undoubtedly most optimistic about Mu 21, Blood is no different, and Hua Lingling. This was because their cultivation was at the late stage of the pure spirit realm, while the other 4 were only at the middle stage of the pure spirit realm. Although Hua Lingling's condition was not good, she had followed Yushu for the longest time and was also in charge of the upper echelons of the Yushu clan. It was impossible to say that she did not have any trump cards in her hands. Time slowly passed, and at this time, Leng Shiqi and Yushu were already a person's height away from the ground. The battle below was no different from what Leng Shiqi had expected. The 4 spirit cultivators at the middle stage of the pure spirit realm were the first to die. There were only Hua Lingling, Mu 21, and Blood is no different left. However, there were only 2 positions. From Leng Shiqi's point of view, he naturally hoped that Mu 21 and Blood is no different would win. These 2 people were more or less related to him. In his opinion, Mu 21 and Blood is no different could join forces to besiege Hua Lingling. This way they would all be able to obtain the qualifications to enter the next level. But from Yushu's point of view, it was best for the 3 of them to fight on their own. The result was exactly not what Leng Shiqi had expected. The 3 of them were now fighting on their own. Hua Lingling swung her sword to deflect Blood is no different spear, but Mu-21's attack had also arrived. When Mu-21 touched Hua Lingling, his hand strangely wrapped around Hua Lingling's arm. It was the vine entanglement technique. At this time, Hua Lingling was already somewhat exhausted. A few traces of ruthlessness flashed past her eyes. She abandoned the sword in her right hand and a chess piece slipped out from her sleeve. She suddenly flicked it, and the chess piece suddenly shot towards Mu-21. Mu-21's expression changed drastically and he hurriedly retreated, but the distance between the two of them was too close. After the chess piece shot out, it grew in the wind and turned into a huge chess piece with the word, "Suppress," engraved on it. Mu-21 could not dodge in time and was heavily pressed to the ground by the chess piece. The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Then the chess piece suddenly disappeared. Mu-21 was lying on the ground covered in blood. His eyes were staring blankly at the top. He was barely breathing. There was not much time left. "Go," Mu-21 said weakly, his tone very calm. Hua Lingling turned her head away and did not look at him. She muttered, "Don't blame me. Haha, to be able to live until now. I'm already very satisfied," Mu-21 said intermittently. Then Hua Lingling and Blood is no different looked at each other and leaped onto the last two stone platforms together. The stone platforms continued to rise as huge cracks began to appear on the ground. Mu-21's gaze finally landed on Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi also lowered his head to look at him. Just as Mu-21's vitality was about to dissipate, Leng Shiqi took off his mask and threw it down. "Then I'll let Raven accompany you." At this point, only 4 of the 46 people who had entered the blood-colored tower were left. The 4 people on the stone platforms all had heavy hearts. None of them spoke. Soon the stone platforms rose into another space. This was a very small room. It was completely bare inside. There was nothing but a stone door in front of them. Leng Shiqi and the other 3 walked down the stone platforms and carefully inspected the place. When they did not find any traps, he said, "You guys recover your spiritual power first. I'll protect you guys." Yushu and the other 2 did not stand on ceremony. They found a corner and sat down cross-legged to circulate their qi. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Leng Shiqi used the breath-concealing technique to conceal his cultivation level. He only revealed that he was at the 9th level of the pure spirit realm. Yushu did not consume much spiritual power, so he finished very quickly. However, Hua Lingling and Blood is no different had just experienced a great battle. Especially when Hua Lingling was still injured, she would need a long time to recover. However, they did not have that much time. About half an hour later, the stone door of the room suddenly opened by itself. An inexplicable force pushed them out. Then the stone door closed by itself. Leng Shiqi looked left and right. The scene in front of them was similar to the previous floors. However, there were also 3 stone doors on the walls in the other 3 directions. Then the 3 stone doors opened one after another, and more than 10 people emerged from them. Upon closer inspection, they were people from Blood Moon, Seiji, and the Qingyan League. After they came out, they also looked around and found people from other forces. Leng Shiqi first looked at Blood Moon. As expected, Delta Origi and Achen were there. There were also 2 spirit cultivators at the late stage of the pure spirit realm. At the same time, Delta Origi also looked over. Their eyes met in the air and then they silently looked away. The people from the other 2 forces were Xiong Ming, Extreme Evil, Qingyan, and Yan Feilin. Xiong Ming's cultivation level was already at the spirit transformation realm. However, when Qingyan saw that Dark Crow from the Yushu clan was not there, she felt a burst of joy. Then she had other thoughts. Chapter 122. 16 people from 4 different factions were gathered here. After they looked at each other, Ji Sha was the first to speak. He said to Qingyan in a strange tone, "Luckily we didn't agree to work with someone. Otherwise we wouldn't be standing here with just 16 people." Qingyan looked at Extreme Evil with displeasure, but she didn't flare up. Instead she spoke to Yushu. "Leader Yu, I remember that you have someone called Dark Crow. He's very strong. Why don't I see him?" Leng Shiqi had already taken off his mask, revealing his true face. But now, only Yushu's group and Delta Origi had seen Leng Shiqi's true face. Everyone else who had seen him was dead. Therefore, no one knew that he was actually Dark Crow. Yushu chuckled in his heart, but he deliberately put on an ugly expression and said in an unfriendly tone, "Qingyan League leader, you should mind your own business." Just as Qingyan was about to say something, a huge spiritual formation suddenly appeared on the ground. The spiritual formation shone with a dense blood-red light, and a huge figure gradually rose from the ground. Qingyan and the others all closed their mouths and stared at the figure. It was a strange demon beast that was more than 10 feet tall. It was strange because its upper body was that of a bull, and its thick arms carried two pitch-black pitchforks. However, its lower body was that of a long snake. The intersection of the two bodies seemed to be sewn together by red silk threads, and a faint blood-red light could be seen coming out. There were also 8 chains in the spiritual formation that tightly bound the demon beast. It kept struggling and roaring, but the chains didn't move at all. Lung Shiqi silently drew his spiritual sword and was on full alert. Everyone else was the same. They could all guess that this might be the last test. Demonic beasts that could be used as the final test were definitely not easy to deal with. After the demonic beasts in the spiritual array appeared, the 8 Vajra chains suddenly retracted, and the spiritual array disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. The moment the chains and the spiritual array disappeared, the demonic beast roared towards the sky, and a ferocious sound wave reverberated outwards. Everyone covered their ears in pain. What was even more terrifying was that a powerful and terrifying aura was being emitted from the demonic beast's body. It was an aura that was enough to make everyone despair. That aura pressed down on everyone's body, causing everyone's face to turn pale. This was definitely not a rank 2 monster beast. Behind the Delta Origi, Ah Chin shouted in horror, Is this a rank 3 monster? Although the others didn't say anything, they all had the same thought in their minds. Originally, they thought that they had already paid enough attention to this demonic beast, but unexpectedly, this demonic beast's strength had far exceeded their expectations. Would they be able to pass the final test? Among this group of people, only Leng Shiqi knew that this demonic beast wasn't a rank 3 monster. This was because when he accidentally entered the underground space for the first time, he accidentally heard the conversation between Meng Wanshan and Zhuo Laogue. He knew that the Blood Mist Island didn't seem to be able to contain a rank 3 monster. And this strange demonic beast in front of them should be the blood fusion beast that Zhuo Laogue spoke of. Leng Shiqi whispered to Yushu, This is a blood fusion beast. Its strength is comparable to a rank 3 monster, but it's not very stable. While the demonic beast is not ready to attack, we should take the initiative and attack its stitches. Yushu didn't know how Leng Shiqi obtained this information, but he didn't have any suspicions and didn't ask any questions. He shouted, Everyone! At this final step, I don't think anyone is willing to die here. Don't hide anymore, we should take the initiative and attack the stitches with all our strength. The people from the other 3 forces weren't stupid. They knew that only by working together would they have a chance of survival. When Yushu's voice fell, they all nodded solemnly. Leng Shiqi's spirit power revolved and his left hand lit up with starlight. Then he quickly formed a dozen spirit seals. A circular spirit formation suddenly appeared in front of him, and a large amount of cold air gathered in the spirit formation. In the blink of an eye, the cold air condensed into a 3-meter-long ice sword. Leng Shiqi pushed his hands forward and the ice sword suddenly flew out. This was Leng Shiqi's fusion of Spirit Attack and Frost Sword Chi. Spirit Attack, Ice Giant Sword. Yushu didn't pay much attention to Leng Shiqi's movements. He threw out a chess piece. This chess piece was very similar to the one that Hua Lingling used before, but the word seal was written on it. However, when the others saw Leng Shiqi make such a giant ice sword, their expressions were different, but they were all shocked. They didn't expect this person to be a spirit caster. But how come they had never seen or heard of him before? Of course, they didn't have the time to think about this now. Most of them took out different but powerful things. These were basically their trump cards, but they didn't hesitate to use them at this time. However, they didn't expect these things to be able to kill the monster. They just wanted to weaken it as much as possible before the real battle. Leng Shiqi's Frost Greatsword was the first to pierce through the seams of the fused blood beast. However, to everyone's surprise, the Frost Greatsword was only able to pierce through a little before it was unable to penetrate any further. Leng Shiqi narrowed his eyes and the spirit seal in his hand changed. The giant ice sword turned into a large amount of cold air and covered the upper body of the blood beast. In the blink of an eye, a layer of ice crystals formed. At the same time, Yushu's chess piece smashed down, and at the same time, 7 strange things flew over. In an instant, all kinds of fire, thunder and wind blades whistled and smashed into the stitches of the blood beast's abdomen, causing the entire space to be filled with rolling waves of spiritual power. Everyone stared at the blood beast. Leng Shiqi pulled the hood on his head and quietly opened his supercilious eyes. Through his supercilious eyes, he could see that the spiritual power in the blood beast's body had indeed weakened and was a little unstable. When the light dissipated, the blood beast's body was revealed. There was a small hole on its head, which should have been hit by Yushu's chest piece. There were several different kinds of wounds on its abdomen, but none of them were deep. Everyone's attacks did hurt it, but it was only a light injury. The merged blood beast had just escaped from the trap, and before it could start a massacre, it was beaten to a pulp. It waved its arms furiously and threw the pair of pitchforks at the people from the Netherworld office. Meng Ming, Extreme Evil, and the others instantly scattered and retreated. However, one of them was still a step too slow due to the terrifying aura of the blood beast, and was instantly pierced through by the pitchforks. He couldn't be any more dead. Everyone was shocked when they saw this scene. That person was at the 8th level of the pure spirit realm, but he couldn't even withstand a single attack. Chapter 123. The power of the merged blood beast exceeded everyone's expectations, but at this point there was no turning back. The only thing left for them was to fight to the death. After the merged blood beast killed one person, the first to make a move was Xiong Ming, who was closest to it. Xiong Ming held two strange purple scimitars in his hands. After injecting his spiritual power into them, purple patterns appeared on the scimitars, releasing beams of mesmerizing purple light. Xiong Ming had also cultivated movement techniques. His body moved, and two thin purple beams of light flashed through the air, slashing at the merged blood beast's snake tail. Delta Orgi was one step behind him. She held an azure longsword, and judging from its quality, it was also a third-stage spirit sword. She used her bewildering footwork technique, and with a swing of her longsword, hundreds of azure sword lights instantly engulfed the merged blood beast. Yushu, Qingyan, and the others also followed in a timely manner. In the instant that Xiong Ming's dual blades slashed down, the merged blood beast twisted its body in an attempt to evade. However, right at this moment, 6 earthen pillars as thick as an arm suddenly erupted from the ground, trapping the merged blood beast in place. The one who made this move was none other than Leng Shiqi. Now that he was a step closer to developing the Hand of the Earth, and with the breakthrough in his cultivation, it was no problem for him to summon 6 earthen pillars in an instant. Even though the 6 earthen pillars were shattered by the merged blood beast in the blink of an eye, everyone's attacks had already arrived in that short period of time. Xiong Ming's dual blades slashed out, leaving 2 deep gashes on the merged blood beast's snake tail. The merged blood beast's arms suddenly turned, and it raised its 2 pitchforks, but they were blocked by Delta Orgi's countless sword lights. Immediately afterward, Yushu's saber lights, Qingyan's fists, and everyone else's attacks also landed on the merged blood beast's body. More than a dozen powerful attacks left wounds all over the merged blood beast's snake body. Among them, Xiong Ming, Yushu, and Qingyan were the ones who left the most severe wounds. At this moment, a bang was heard. The fused blood beast had crushed all the sword lights and sent Delta Orgi flying. However, it did not have enough strength left. She continued to dissipate the force of the attack in midair and finally landed lightly on the ground. Obviously, she was not injured at all. Then, the fused blood beast swung its tail, trying to fling all the ants away. However, at this moment, a thick earthen wall rose from the ground and helped everyone to slow down. Taking advantage of this gap, everyone retreated. Unfortunately, one of them was still sent flying by the snake's tail and crashed into the wall in the distance. Moreover, his entire body sank into the wall. Viscous blood could be seen flowing out from the wound. The power of the fused blood beast's tail was so strong. The eyes of the fused blood beast burst out with 2 bloody rays. It looked around with a ferocious expression, and its gaze finally locked onto the Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi suddenly felt an invisible pressure pressing down on his heart, making him a little breathless. However, he did not panic at all. He raised his arms and erected 3 thick earthen walls in front of him. Then, a layer of black mist rose from under his feet and he quickly dodged. Almost at the same time, the fused blood beast twisted its huge body and charged onto the earthen walls in a few seconds. The 3 earthen walls crumbled like paper, but Leng Shiqi had already dodged out of the way. After Leng Shiqi stood still, he did not stay idle. His left hand flashed and a large amount of cold air condensed before him to form a giant ice sword. He pushed with both hands and the giant ice sword flew out, stabbing into the wound caused by Xiong Ming's attack. This time, the giant ice sword pierced 1/3 of the way in. At the same time, extremely cold air and a few rays of sword energy burst out and mercilessly eroded the flesh of the fused blood beast's tail. Even so, the fused blood beast did not care about the injury to its tail and immediately charged at Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi could not help but curse. He had hidden his strength before so that he would not be noticed by the fused blood beast, but he was still targeted. He did not know why his hatred was so great. If this continued, he would have to reveal his strength. Unexpectedly, just as the fused blood beast charged over, a person suddenly appeared next to it. It was Delta Origi. But now, Gusan was a bit unimaginable. Her black hair had turned white, and her face had become abnormally pale, but the aura on her body had become a bit stronger. Delta Origi's green sword shot out streaks of sharp light. The green sword successfully pierced the fused blood beast's flesh, but it could not stop its advance. Delta Origi had an idea. She grabbed the hilt of her sword and poured spirit force into her legs to stop the fused blood beast. The fused blood beast did not slow down in the slightest. Instead, a long sword mark appeared on its body. Lung Shiqi held the sword in his right hand and his left hand clenched into a fist. He was ready to attack at any moment. After Gusan made his move, Lung Shiqi was surprised to see that Meng Ming also made his move. He swung his arms and two streaks of purple light pierced through the air, piercing into the back of the blood beast. At the same time, Yushu also arrived. He jumped high into the air and slashed down with a giant blade energy. The three spirit transformation realm cultivators finally managed to hinder the fused blood beast a bit. Seeing this, Lung Shiqi quickly used the ghost parade and confusion movement technique to escape. Boom! The fused blood beast's two pitchforks smashed into the ground, creating a deep hole. Lung Shiqi's eyes were filled with intelligence. He pointed with his spirit sword and turned into 9 afterimages that stabbed out at the same time. The 9 afterimages formed a circle and each sword carried a light blue sword energy as they stabbed into the fused blood beast's lower abdomen. Puff, puff, puff. 9 small sword marks appeared on the fused blood beast's body and 9 waves of cold energy invaded it. This was the chaotic flower dazzling eyes that had fused with the cold sword energy. The cold energy entered the fused blood beast's body and caused it to stiffen for a moment. Achin hesitated for a moment, but he immediately took out a brown cylinder. He opened it and pressed the mechanism at the end. Immediately, a black object shot into the air and landed on top of the blood beast's head. Following that, 10 sharp black short arrows suddenly shot down. However, those short arrows were not aimed at the blood beast, but at the ground around it. The black mass in the air instantly expanded and turned into a large black net that slid down, trapping the fusion blood fiend within. The fused blood beast immediately waved its arms and twisted its snake tail, but it didn't know what material the black net was made of. It was abnormally tough and didn't break. Chance. This thought appeared in everyone's mind. They all rushed forward and used their most powerful spirit techniques. Qingyan, who hadn't made a move yet, suddenly made her fists bigger. Then her fists became extremely red like iron that had been burned for a long time. At the same time, Lung Shiqi clenched his fists and smashed them out like a tiger stepping on the waves. Chapter 124. Lung Shiqi's ferocious tiger treading wave fist slammed into the fusion blood beast's abdomen. The yin and yang fists blasted out and finally tore a hole. Especially the internal strength that was constantly stirring its meridians and flesh. The fusion blood beast trembled in pain. At this time in Lung Shiqi's vision, the fusion blood beast's spiritual energy was rapidly gathering at its head, condensing into a ball. At this moment, Lung Shiqi's mind flashed as if he had thought of something. At the same time, the attacks of the others fell. The fusion blood beast's injuries increased, especially the snake tail that was almost broken. The fusion blood beast suddenly burst out a bloody wave from its body. The two tridents were surrounded by a bloody light. With a chi-la sound, the black net that bound it was instantly cut into pieces. The fused blood beast waved its arms and slapped away the people who couldn't react in time. Immediately, several people died on the spot. Then, the fusion blood beast raised its body high and a large hole opened at the back of its neck. Then a huge snake head emerged from it. The snake head opened its bloody mouth and sprayed out a large amount of green mucus. The green mucus emitted a disgusting stench, but no one cared about it. Because anyone who was sprayed by the green mucus was instantly corroded into bones. In addition, there were a few people who were only grazed a little and had small holes corroded into their bodies. What was even more frightening was that a lot of the green mucus splashed on the ground, seriously hindering their movements. Lung Shiqi suddenly shouted at this time, "This snake head is its weakness." He did not care about other people's suspicions. A longbow and several arrows suddenly appeared in his hand. He quickly knocked the bow and several sharp arrows wrapped in rich spiritual energy shot directly at the snake head. The fusion blood beast seemed to feel the threat and turned its body to block the snake head behind it. However, Lung Shichi's arrow made a sharp turn in the air and accurately hit the snake's head. Boom, hiss. The two heads that had fused with the blood beast let out miserable shrieks at the same time. At the same time they kept twisting their bodies, making it impossible for anyone to get close. The fork in Oxhead's hand suddenly changed direction and smashed towards Lung Shichi. Lung Shichi was too close to the fused blood beast. This sudden attack caught him off guard. Even if he used Ghost Parade and Confusion footwork, he could not completely dodge it. At this critical moment, Lung Shichi retreated and shouted in a low voice. Then his whole body showed a silvery white color, and his momentum rose by a notch. Lung Shichi instantly activated the silver-scaled fire-armored crocodile's beast essence battle pattern. In his mind, he had the flowing ink cloak on the outside and the Beastchi battle pattern on the inside. In addition, his body was not weak. Even if he was hit, he would not be seriously injured. But he was wrong. It wasn't that he had misjudged the attack power of the fused blood fiend, but that he had misjudged someone. That was Blood is no different. Just as the fork was about to fall, Blood is no different suddenly appeared in front of Lung Shichi. Blood is no different raised the spear in his hand. He did not stab out but swept it out like a stick. However, his attack was nothing in front of the fused blood fiend. The spear was split in half in an instant. The fork pierced through Blood is no different's body. With Blood is no different blocking, Lung Shichi also retreated. But at this time, his eyes were wide open and a somewhat complicated expression appeared on his face. He never thought that Blood is no different would use his own life to block an attack for him. Blood is no different? Lung Shichi shouted these three words in an indescribable tone. His voice contained doubt, confusion, anger, and regret. Blood is no different smiled softly and said intermittently, "You spared my life. I will repay you with my life. It's only right, of course. Only right." Hearing these words, Lung Shichi's mind instantly returned to the scene when he attacked Bailey Qin. Blood is no different had risked his life to stop him. At that time, Lung Shichi had asked him why he risked his life to protect Bailey Qin. Blood is no different said, "He saved my life, it's only right that I repay him with my life." Lung Shichi still remembered clearly the stubborn and proud expression on Blood is no different's face. At that time, Lung Shichi didn't kill him not because he was soft-hearted, but because he felt a trace of admiration in his heart. On this Blood Fog Island, there were very few people who could still uphold their pride and their beliefs. Lung Shichi admitted that he couldn't do this. At that time, Lung Shichi even felt a bit of jealousy. He was jealous that someone was willing to die for Bailey Qin. But now there was someone who was willing to die for him. That person was Blood is no different. Ha ha ha. Lung Shichi suddenly laughed. Only right, what a good only right. He laughed, but his laughter was full of regret and annoyance. At this moment, Lung Shichi regretted hiding his strength for the first time. If he had revealed his full strength from the beginning, Blood is no different would know that the blood beast fusion couldn't kill him. Blood is no different naturally wouldn't have sacrificed himself to save him. If Blood is no different had died at the hands of the blood beast fusion, or even at the hands of others, Lung Shichi might have only felt pity. However, Blood is no different had died for him and in vain. Bang bang. At this moment, the blood beast fusion unleashed its might, and the people around it were either killed or crippled. Delta Origi was bathed in blood, and Yushu collapsed to the ground. Lung Shichi's pupils dilated. He had never felt such regret in his 2 lives. He always thought that he was a heartless person and always tried to suppress his emotions. In fact, in his heart, he had long regarded Blood is no different as a friend, Yushu as a brother, and Delta Origi as a confidant. However, he never dared to admit it. He was afraid that once he had feelings he would be indecisive. He suddenly felt that he was even more ridiculous, and it was ridiculous that he had comforted Yushu. It turned out that he was an extremely ridiculous, heartless lover. Ba-dump, ba-dump. At this moment, Lung Shichi could clearly hear his own heartbeat, and he knew his own heart. Lung Shichi took 1 step forward, 2 steps, 3 steps. With every step he took, his figure grew taller and bigger. Every time he took a step, his muscles would bulge up a little. With every step he took, his aura increased by a notch. Roar. Finally, Lung Shichi opened his mouth and let out a beast-like roar. At this moment he was already as tall as an adult and his muscles bulged. The outer layer of his white robe was torn to shreds, and his eyes were faintly flickering with blood. At this moment, Lung Shichi actually activated the spiritual ruin beast king and the silver-scaled fire-armored crocodile at the same time. The rest of the people looked at Leng Shiqi in shock. Leng Shiqi's strength was far beyond their imagination. Chapter 125. Leng Shiqi, who had activated 2 Beast Origin battle runes, suddenly jumped out and smashed toward the Fusion Blood Beast like a cannonball. The Fusion Blood Beast waved its arm and swatted Leng Shiqi away like it was swatting a fly. With a bang, Leng Shiqi smashed into the wall above him. However, he was not injured at all and did not fall down. Instead, he used his chakra movement technique to stand upside down on the wall. His eyes were filled with boundless killing intent. Leng Shiqi found an opportunity and raised his spear. His body was filled with a domineering aura and he stabbed down. The spear shook rapidly in the air and drew a huge bloody cross in the air. It crashed down with a terrifying amount of spirit force. The Fusion Blood Beast felt the danger from above and raised its head. At the same time, it swung its 2 pitchforks to meet the attack. When the spear and pitchforks collided, a terrifying shockwave suddenly exploded. Huge amounts of spirit force spread out and forced everyone to retreat. With a kacha sound, Leng Shiqi's long spear was the first to break apart. Fortunately, the cross spear managed to block the Fusion Blood Beast's attack. Leng Shiqi used the force to quickly change direction in the air and landed on the back of the Fusion Blood Beast. Following closely behind was a magnificent saber light that resembled a crescent moon. It was the half-moon light slash. And it was the half-moon light slash that Leng Shiqi used with all his strength. Meng Ming, Qingyan, and the others immediately recognized that this was a powerful sword technique that only the Dark Crow knew. It turned out that Leng Shiqi was the Dark Crow. Qingyan's face suddenly became pale and he felt a lingering fear in his heart. He remembered that when he gathered everyone to discuss the alliance, he had attacked Leng Shiqi. If Leng Shiqi had erupted with this level of combat power, even if he was at the spirit transformation realm, he wouldn't have been able to last more than a few moves. Leng Shiqi's half-moonlight slash was aimed at the snake's head, but unexpectedly, the snake's head retreated back into its body. Leng Shiqi had no choice but to change his target at the last moment, and the blade slashed at the back of the blood beast's neck. Rip! The magnificent saber light tore open a deep wound on the neck of the fused blood beast, revealing half of its snake head. At this moment, the snake head opened its bloody mouth and spat out a stream of green mucus. It was too late for Leng Shiqi to dodge. Instead, he raised his sword to protect his heart. The 5 fingers of his other hand clenched into a fist. Instantly, an incomparably turbulent fist force smashed down brazenly like a ferocious tiger breaking the waves. At the same time, the snake head spat out green mucus onto Leng Shiqi's body. The mucus sprayed on his spirit saber and made a chi-chi sound. In a few breaths of time, a large hole appeared on the spirit saber and the green mucus adhered to the flowing ink robe. The flowing ink robe immediately lit up, but in the end, it was unable to block the green mucus. In the end, the green mucus made contact with Leng Shiqi's body. However, at this moment, Leng Shiqi's body was covered in silver scales. The scales were extremely hard and resisted the green mucus. However, because the silver scales were actually Leng Shiqi's skin, the searing pain still spread throughout his body. Leng Shiqi didn't make a sound and smashed down with the fierce tiger wave stomping fist. There was a poochie sound and the snake head was instantly shattered by the fist force. The fused blood beast's body suddenly twitched as if it was spasming. The others were still shocked by Leng Shiqi's terrifying strength, but now that there was a chance, they all attacked once more. After Leng Shiqi shattered the snake's head, he saw a fist-sized blood-red bead under the snake's head. He had a flash of inspiration. He guessed that this was the bloodly bead that Zhuo Laogue had mentioned. This was the core of the fused blood beast. Leng Shiqi's eyes were filled with endless ferocity. He took out a purple-blue bead from the system space and stuffed it into the fused blood beast's wound. That was the righteous thunder bead. It was comparable to the full power of a mid-stage spirit transformation realm cultivator and was the bane of evil things like the fused blood beast. After throwing out the righteous thunder bead, Leng Shiqi quickly jumped off the fused blood beast's body. Immediately after, there was a rumbling sound as if there was thunder. The sound of thunder came from the fused blood beast's body. Then more and more thunder rumbled. Bolts of purple lightning shot out and covered the fused blood beast's body. The purple lightning seemed to have a great restraining effect on the fused blood beast. The fused blood beast couldn't move and black smoke kept coming out of its body. Its bloody mouth was wide open, but it couldn't make any sound. Its flesh and blood had been almost completely destroyed by the righteous thunder bead. When Leng Shiqi saw this, he felt a bit of joy in his heart. However, he suddenly noticed something strange with his white eyes. The fused blood beast's spirit force and blood began to boil. The fused blood beast's body also began to swell a bit. Lung Shiqi knew that something was wrong and immediately shouted, "Retreat! It might self-destruct." The moment he finished speaking, everyone else immediately retreated. Yushu protected Hua Lingling and said to Lung Shiqi, "Brother Lung, come here." When Lung Shiqi saw Yushu take off a jade pendant from his waist, he immediately flashed to Yushu's side. Yushu smashed the jade pendant in his hand. Then the jade pendant surged with spirit force and spun continuously. In an instant, it turned into a circular shield. There were strange runes on the shield. Lung Shiqi was still a bit worried behind the shield. Immediately, his spirit force surged out and he raised his arms. 5 thick earth walls rose in front of him. Right after Lung Shiqi raised the earthen wall, countless rays of blood-red light shot out from the blood-fused beast, and then its entire body exploded. Boom boom boom, deafening explosions continued to sound. Waves of terrifying shockwaves mixed with the remains of the fused blood beast swept out. Lung Shiqi's 5 earth walls only lasted for 3 breaths of time before they all shattered. In the end, the shockwaves crashed into Yushu's spirit shield, causing the spirit shield to suddenly distort. In the blink of an eye, a few cracks appeared on the spirit shield. Lung Shiqi saw that the spirit shield was about to collapse. His left hand flashed and quickly gathered a large amount of cold air. After the cold air surged out, it didn't condense into a sword. Instead, it turned into an ice wall. Waves of shockwaves mixed with the remains of the fused blood beast continued to rush over. Yushu's spirit shield finally couldn't hold on and shattered into specks of spirit force. Fortunately, the shockwaves of the shockwaves weren't too big. Lung Shiqi's ice wall was finally blocked. When everything calmed down, Lung Shiqi's body finally couldn't hold on anymore. He automatically removed the beast essence battle patterns of the Spirit Ruin Beast King and the Silver Scale Fire Armored Crocodile. The moment he removed the beast essence battle patterns, he felt powerless and suddenly collapsed to the ground. He felt bursts of pain coming from his body. It was as if his bones and meridians were being torn apart. Not only that, but there were also countless small bloody marks on his body. What was worse was that both his spirit force and mental force were almost exhausted. It could be said that he didn't even have 10% of his combat strength left. Lung Shiqi quickly took out a few pills and swallowed them. At this moment he couldn't care about the side effects. He continued to forcefully maintain the supercilious eyes and wanted to see the situation. What made him feel relieved was that the spirit force and aura of the fused blood beast were completely gone. It was truly dead. At this moment he let out a sigh of relief. He looked around. Including the 3 of them, there were still 4 people alive. They were Delta Origi, Qin Xiongming and Qing Yan. At this moment, there were only 7 people left on the entire Blood Mist Island. However, just as Lung Shiqi was about to retract his eyes, the corners of his eyes suddenly twitched. He had clearly seen 7 people just now, but now there was an extra person who had appeared out of nowhere. And that person was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye he was behind one of them. Behind Hua Lingling. Chapter 126. Lung Shiqi suddenly felt a chill on his back. Just as he was about to warn her, he heard a poochie sound. A figure had strangely appeared behind Hua Lingling and a sharp dagger had already pierced her back. Puff. Hua Lingling coughed out a mouthful of blood and the vitality in her eyes quickly dissipated. At this moment, Yushu's mind went blank with a boom. Hua Lingling. Yushu's eyes instantly became bloodshot and he turned to look at the person who had attacked. Lung Shiqi also saw this person and was very surprised to find that this person was Yan Feilin. In Lung Shiqi's impression, Yan Feilin was a person with a very low sense of existence. He was like an old dog by Qing Yan's side, obeying only Qing Yan and never having his own opinions. Lung Shiqi vaguely remembered that during the battle with the fusion blood beast, Yan Feilin seemed to have been sent flying. Everyone thought he was dead. After that, Lung Shiqi's attention was focused on the fusion blood beast and he didn't pay much attention to the others. However, he never would have thought that Yan Feilin had been hiding himself the entire time. He had watched the fusion blood beast fight and waited for the dust to settle before stabbing them in the back. Was he not afraid that the fusion blood beast would kill everyone? Now that the fusion blood beast had just died, the few people who survived immediately began to fight among themselves. Yushu was extremely angry and filled with hatred. The moment he attacked, blade energy filled the sky and swept toward Yan Feilin like a torrential rain. For Yan Feilin, his target from the beginning was the Yushu clan. The reason he chose Hua Lingling was because Yushu and Leng Shiqi were both at the spirit transformation realm. Even if they were injured, Yan Feilin wasn't confident he could kill them in one blow. That was why Hua Lingling was the best target. However, when he saw Yushu's torrential blade light descending, his heart shook. Immediately after, he hurriedly moved his body and dodged those blade lights. It turned out that he had also cultivated a movement spirit technique, and it didn't look like it was a low-rank one. However, Yan Feilin didn't expect a few thick pillars to rise from the ground under his feet. Normally, these things wouldn't be able to trap him and he could break free at any time. However, right now he was under Yushu's blade energy, and a small mistake could cost him his life. Yushu and Yan Feilin's battle was only one side. After Yan Feilin's sneak attack on Hua Lingling, everyone began to move. Xiong Ming and Qing Yan were to attack to kill Leng Shiqi and Yushu respectively. Xiong Ming was very fast. He suddenly appeared before Leng Shiqi and slashed down with his two purple blades. Leng Shiqi sensed danger the moment Xiong Ming moved. He turned around and hid behind the ice wall from before. At the same time, he waved his hand and a purple crow appeared before him. The crow flew toward Qing Yan and stopped Qing Yan, who was charging toward Yushu. This purple crow was naturally the purple feather. In fact, not long ago, Leng Shiqi had discovered that the purple feather could be placed in the system space. However, after thinking about it, he understood that the purple feather didn't have an independent consciousness. It wasn't a living thing, so it could be placed in the system space. Ever since entering the blood-colored tower, Leng Shiqi had never used the purple feather because it was his only trump card that didn't consume spirit force. The other was of course the Righteous Thunder Orb. It could be said that the purple feather was his last trump card. The purple feather played a key role in this moment. It bought a lot of time for Yushu. While they were fighting, something happened to Delta Origi. Delta Origi was heavily injured in the battle with the Blood Fiend. She was now covered in blood. She couldn't even stand properly and spat out a mouthful of blood. Ah Chen, who had been standing beside her, suddenly slammed his palm toward Delta Origi's head. However, a strange scene appeared. The blood that Gu San spat out did not land on the ground. Instead, it instantly condensed into a blood arrow in the air. With a whoosh, the blood arrow pierced Ah Chen's heart. Ah Chen's palm suddenly stopped. He looked at Delta Origi in disbelief and muttered, "You've been guarding against me for a long time." "That's right," Delta Origi said coldly. "What? I'm so loyal to you. Why would you suspect me and guard against me?" Ah Chen knew that he didn't have time, but he still didn't understand. He didn't want to die without knowing why. He had joined Delta Origi ever since they established the Blood Moon. He had always followed Delta Origi and sacrificed a lot for her. He had never done anything out of line. He really couldn't understand where he had exposed himself. Delta Origi walked to his side and whispered, "You're too loyal. I won't trust someone who's so loyal on Blood Mist Island." "Ah, it's because I'm too loyal that I'll be suspected. Delta Origi, one day you'll die from your own suspicion and arrogance." Ah Chen fell to the ground weakly after saying this. The battles all happened at the same time. When Ah Chen fell, Yan Feilin was also restrained by Leng Shiqi's hand of earth. Yushu's blade light swallowed him up. Even though Yan Feilin had movement techniques, he still couldn't dodge. His body was covered in blade wounds and he died in the end. Leng Shiqi hid behind the ice wall. When he saw that Yushu had taken care of Yan Feilin, he felt a bit more at ease. However, in the blink of an eye, the ice wall in front of him was cut into several pieces. Two purple scimitars were right in front of him. Leng Shiqi didn't dodge. Instead, he pulled out his spirit sword and stabbed out 4 times. 2 invisible channel invading sword energies and 2 light blue frost sword energies shot out. Meng Ming swung his dual blades and shattered the frost sword energies. However, the other 2 channel invading sword energies stabbed into his lower abdomen. After the channel invading sword energies entered his body, they immediately sealed off the meridians in his abdomen. One had to know that the lower abdomen was where the Sea of Qi was located. When that area was sealed, most of Meng Ming's spirit energy was sealed. Of course, Meng Ming could still use his spirit energy to break the seal, but that would take time. Of course, Leng Shiqi wouldn't give Meng Ming time to break the seal. He raised his sword and was about to stab out when something unexpected happened. Purple Feather, who he'd sent to hold off Qing Yan, had fallen limply to the ground. Black smoke and sparks were rising from his body. Qing Yan's hands were covered in a layer of faint flames. However, he was in great pain as well. His palms were slightly charred. It seemed that he'd used some kind of secret technique to kill Purple Feather. Leng Shiqi had thought that Qing Yan was already heavily injured. Even though Purple Feather was a level lower than him, he should have been able to hold off Qin Yin. However, in this world there was no such thing. Leng Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. Purple Feather wasn't sentient. In other words, it was an inanimate object. It was no different from a puppet. However, it had followed Leng Shiqi for a very long time. During the days when he cultivated alone, it was always Purple Feather that comforted him. Leng Shiqi didn't know what kind of feelings he had for Purple Feather. In any case, he was going to avenge its death. Intense killing intent flashed in his eyes. He first exchanged a glance with Yushu. Yushu nodded in tacit understanding, then swung his blade at Meng Ming. Meanwhile, Leng Shiqi walked toward Qin Yin with his sword in hand. Chapter 127. When Qin Yin saw Leng Shiqi walking over with a strong killing intent, he felt a little guilty. At this point, everyone had used up their trump cards and their spiritual force was almost depleted. It was time to fight. Unfortunately, Qin Yin's foundation as a spirit transformation realm cultivator was not stable. Also, he had personally witnessed Leng Shiqi severely injuring the fusion blood fiend. It could be said that without Leng Shiqi, they would have already died in the mouth of the fusion blood fiend. Therefore, he was not confident that he could stop Leng Shiqi. At this moment, he caught a glimpse of Delta Origi who had killed a Qin. An idea flashed through his mind. He quickly said, "Delta Origi, there are only 2 people left from the Yushu clan. Let's join forces to kill this person and keep the Yushu clan in check. Then we'll fight to the death." Delta Origi held the green sword with a thoughtful expression. Seeing Delta Origi's reaction, Qin Yin was happy. He knew that there was hope. He continued, "Delta Origi, if you help me kill this person, I'll take you as my master. I won't go back on my word." "Okay, but if you go back on your word, I'll make you wish you were dead," Delta Origi said coldly. Hearing Delta Origi's reply, Qin Yin was overjoyed and felt more confident. "Delta Origi." Leng Shiqi's face suddenly became a little twisted. He shouted, "Qin Yin and I are settling our grudges. Why do you have to interfere?" Delta Origi pointed at him with the green sword and said, "You can only blame yourself for being a member of the Yushu clan." After saying that, a sharp sword light burst out from the 3 bone swords and pierced straight at him. Qin Yin threw out a punch and a palm respectively. 2 blazing waves of spiritual force blasted over. Leng Shiqi was being pincered. He hesitated, and decided to meet force with force. His spirit sword moved and like a startled swan, it pierced towards the Delta Origi. Clang! Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi's swords clashed. Both of them were able to block each other's swords, and neither of them could do anything to the other. Qin Yin thought that this was an excellent opportunity. The speed of his fist and palm increased by a bit, and just as Qin Yin was about to reach him, something that shocked him happened. Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi, who were originally fighting, suddenly turned around and stabbed at him at the same time. At this moment, Qin Yin turned pale with fright. However, the distance between them was too close and he had no way of dodging. Qin Yin had no choice but to stake everything on this one attack. The power of his fist and palm increased by 30%. However, strangely, the figures of Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi disappeared from his sight at the same time. Qin Yin's heart skipped a beat and he knew that something was wrong. Sure enough, in the next moment 2 swords pierced through his back and pierced through his body. It was not until he died that he realized that Blood Moon had joined forces with the Yushu clan. Sadly, he was just overjoyed that he managed to win over the Delta Origi, but in the blink of an eye he was killed by her sword. Everyone's battle started quickly and ended quickly as well. From Yin Feiling's sneak attack on Hua Lingling to Qin Yin's death, it only took a short time. Sneak attack, alliance, betrayal, counterattack. Everything happened in a flash. After Qin Yin fell, Tong Ming, who was fighting with Yushu, felt his heart turn cold. There were only 4 of them left and 3 of them were on the same side. The only ending that awaited him was death. Sure enough, Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi drew closer with their swords. At that moment, a buzzing sound came from the ground, and 2 5-meter-wide formations appeared. Mysterious runes flowed on the formations, but one of them was purple and the other was golden. This sudden development caused Leng Shiqi and the others to stop. They looked at the 2 formations and a myriad of thoughts flashed through their minds. Actually, it had been less than 10 minutes since they killed the fused demon beast. These 2 formations should have only appeared after the fused blood fiends had died. However, what were these 2 formations for? The 4 of them had this question in their minds. Just as they were puzzled, an old voice came from all directions. "The last survivors of Blood Mist Island, These two formations are the transportation formations to leave Blood Mist Island's secret realm. However, only one of them is a true transportation formation. Make your choice. After saying this, the voice disappeared. Lung Shiqi and the others looked at each other. Hearing this, they were surprised, happy, and angry. They were happy that they had finally reached this step. They were the best of the 10,000 people, and they were only one step away from leaving Blood Mist Island. However, they were surprised that the test was still not over. There was still one last step. There was no intense struggle at this step, nor was there any scheming. There was only a choice between the two. If they made the right choice, they would live. If they made the wrong choice, they would die. This was a test of their luck. Lung Shiqi couldn't help but feel a sense of unwillingness and anger in his heart. Who knew how many bloody storms they had experienced, and how much deception they had experienced? In the end, they had to rely on luck to decide their life and death. The four of them looked more serious than the last, and they all fell into hesitation. However, Lung Shiqi immediately calmed down and kept thinking of a solution. Suddenly, Lung Shiqi's mind lit up, and he thought of a possible solution. Then his gaze fell on Xiongming. Lung Shiqi gestured to Delta Origi, and the two of them flashed and suddenly appeared on either side of Xiongming. Then two spirit swords were placed on his neck. Xiongming was completely unperturbed. He said calmly, "The winner takes all. Kill me if you want." Lung Shiqi reached out and grabbed the two purple scimitars in Xiongming's hands. He had been coveting these for a long time. He then said in a deep voice, "I won't kill you. On the contrary, I'll give you a chance to choose between life and death." Upon hearing Lung Shiqi's words, Xiongming immediately understood his intentions. He snorted coldly and said, "Humph, you want to use me to test which path is the right one? You're underestimating them. I have my own methods. You just have to tell me if you want to or not. If you don't want to, I won't make things difficult for you. However, you're giving up 50% of your chance of survival. Are you really willing to do that?" Lung Shiqi continued. His voice was filled with persuasion. Xiongming didn't hesitate and immediately replied, "If you really have a way, I'll agree." Lung Shiqi smiled and said, "Very well, I'll plant a spirit technique on you later. It'll hurt a bit, so bear with it. Then, you can choose any formation you want to enter." Xiongming nodded to show that he understood. Lung Shiqi immediately formed a spirit seal. Then, a red circle of light appeared on his palm. Within the circle of light, there was a lifelike centipede twisting. With a wave of his hand, the centipede burrowed into Xiongming's left arm. Lung Shiqi purposely chose this place. He was afraid that the perfected centipede curse would cause the heavily injured Xiongming to die from the pain. After the centipede curse entered his body, Xiongming's face was filled with pain. A layer of cold sweat appeared on his forehead, but he gritted his teeth and didn't make a sound. His eyes were filled with a strong desire to live. His gaze drifted back and forth between the two formations. A short while later, he resolutely walked into the golden formation. Then his figure disappeared. Lung Shiqi hurriedly closed his eyes to sense the centipede curse's existence. If the centipede curse was still there, it meant that Xiongming wasn't dead. The golden formation was the path to survival. On the other hand, the purple formation was the path to survival. A few seconds later, Lung Shiqi suddenly opened his eyes. Chapter 128. In a dark hall, there were two old men in black robes, one standing and one sitting. In front of them was a huge golden spirit formation that slowly rotated, illuminating a corner of the hall. The old man who was standing was pacing back and forth, looking a little anxious, while the old man who was sitting was calm and composed. "Oldwood, can you stop for a moment? You're going to make me go blind with your pacing. You're over 200 years old, why are you still so impatient?" The sitting old man said impatiently. The old man who was standing, the old man who the other person called Oldwood, suddenly stopped and said with a trace of anxiousness, "Old Bones, it's easy for you to say that. It's not like you don't know how much our blood clothing pavilion has paid for this matter. Now it's finally time to wrap things up. What if no one comes out?" Old Bones stroked his long beard and said indifferently, "Those who survived to the end must have worked together to kill the blood beast. At the very least, there should be a few people who survived. How could no one have come out? You are overthinking. What should we do if they all choose the path of death? I said there was no need to do this. Those who can survive to the end are definitely the best." Oldwood said hatefully. Old Bone shook his head and said slowly, No. Since ancient times, all the almighty beings have been people with talent, comprehension, shrewdness, will, and luck. What we need is a peerless prodigy who can lead the Blood-Robe Pavilion to break this stalemate. The old blockhead puckered his lips and intended to say something, but right at this moment, the golden formation suddenly trembled, and then a figure appeared from within it. Was Xiong Ming. Xiong Ming suddenly came here and immediately tried to look around while enduring the pain. But suddenly an old face appeared in front of him. That old face had an exaggerated smile as it looked at him. Xiong Ming's body shook and he quickly retreated. But he found that he couldn't move his body at all. The owner of that old face was naturally Old Wood. Old Wood saw someone finally come out and excitedly jumped over. He said kindly, "Child, what's your name? You're the best on Blood Mist Island, right?" Xiong Ming's eyes flashed. At this moment he knew he had made the right bet. Before Meng Ming could say anything, the blood-red centipede inside his body gnawed at his meridians again, and he couldn't help but let out a muffled moan. Old Blockhead raised his eyebrows and said softly, "So you have a little plaything in your body. Don't worry, let me take it out for you." Old Blockhead extended 2 fingers and was just about to take out the blood-colored centipede when the golden formation shook a few more times. 3 figures appeared one after another. Naturally they were Lung Shiqi, Delta Origi and Yushu. When Old Blockhead saw 3 more people come out, his mouth was wide open. Even Old Bones, who was sitting at the back, stood up with a swoosh sound. His eyes flickered with surprise. Ha 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 ha. Old Blockhead suddenly threw his head back and laughed loudly. "The heavens bless my blood-robe pavilion, the heavens bless my blood-robe pavilion." When Lung Shiqi sensed that the centipede curse in Xiong Ming's body was still alive, he knew that the golden formation was the real way out, so he led Delta Origi and Yushu into the golden formation. However, just as they stood there before they could even observe their surroundings, this madly laughing old man appeared, and he was at a loss for what to do. However, this also meant that they had finally left Blood Mist Island. That was good. Old Blockhead raised his hand, and a blood-red streak flew out of Xiong Ming's body and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Seeing this, Lung Shiqi's heart couldn't help but skip a beat, and he couldn't help but feel scared. If this old man had taken out the blood-red centipede as soon as he saw Xiong Ming, then the 3 of them would have stepped into another path of death. Old Blockhead continued, very good, is there anyone behind you?" Lung Shiqi and the others all shook their heads, but the vigilance in their eyes didn't decrease at all. The old man behind them nodded in satisfaction and said, "Don't worry, you're safe now." For some reason, this old man's words seemed to have a magical power that made Lung Shiqi and the others slowly let down their guard. "All right, since there's no one else, come with us." Old Blockhead waved his hand, and a gust of wind swept the 4 of them away. Before Lung Shiqi and the others could react, the scenery around them quickly receded, and in the blink of an eye, they were forcefully taken to another spacious room. When they stopped, they were still a bit shaken. Lung Shiqi took 2 deep breaths before he felt better and thought to himself, "I don't know what realm these 2 old men are at, I clearly didn't feel any aura from them." This room was empty and there was only a medium-sized pool, but the water in the pool was dark green and bubbling. It didn't look like anything good. Old Blockhead brought them to the pool and said, "Go in." Lung Shiqi and the others looked at Old Blockhead in confusion. "Don't look at me like that, don't be ungrateful. The water in this pool is the Inshur secret spring, it's a treasure for refining poison and cultivating poison techniques. Just a random handful of them would cause many people to fight over them." Lung Shiqi and the others, if they went in, how could they survive? Old Blockhead glanced at Old Blockhead and said, "If the Inshur secret spring meets the blood sea poison, the 2 will mix and become a supreme treasure for cleansing the body and tempering the blood. What you don't know is that every trace of spirit energy you absorb on Blood Mist Island contains the blood sea poison." Hearing this, Lung Shiqi and the others were shocked. Lung Shiqi was secretly surprised. "Doesn't that mean that we've already absorbed a lot of the blood sea poison in our bodies without us knowing? Although I don't know what it is, it can't be anything good." Old Blockhead said, "That's right, once you enter the Inshur secret spring, you can cleanse your body and be reborn. You must have used some improper methods to increase your strength on Blood Mist Island, right? I can take this opportunity to remove the hidden dangers for you." Lung Shiqi and the others looked at each other silently, but no one moved for a while. Old Blockhead saw this and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. Old Blockhead pulled a long face and said, "What, are you afraid that I'll trick you? Go in." He waved his hand and Lung Shiqi and the others were instantly pushed into the pool by an invisible force. With a few splashes, the 4 of them sank into the water. Lung Shiqi's body sank into the dark green water, and the moment he touched the water seeped into his body. He quickly looked inside himself and found that a thick blood mist had appeared in his body at some point. The blood mist and the green water intersected and suddenly transformed into little golden lights. The golden lights then merged into Leng Shiqi's sea of qi and flesh. He immediately felt the spirit energy in his body growing steadily, and his body strength was also slowly increasing. Leng Shiqi knew that the two old men were not lying, and also understood that this was a rare opportunity. He quickly gathered his thoughts and closed his eyes to cultivate. Just as they were immersed in their cultivation, Old Bones said something. Chapter 129. Seeing Leng Shiqi's group of 4 enter a state of cultivation, Old Bones said, "Old Wood, aren't you in too much of a hurry? You didn't even ask for their names. You also didn't explain the situation of the blood-clad pavilion to them before throwing them in." Old Wood scratched his head awkwardly. He knew that he was too impatient, but he immediately changed the topic. "Hey, it's not too late to talk about it after they come out. By the way, Old Bones, what do you think of these children?" Old Bones pondered for a moment and said, "Excellent in every aspect." Old Wood looked at Old Bones with a bit of surprise. "I didn't expect them to receive such high praise from you." On the path of spirit cultivation, many people think that cultivation talent is the most important, but in reality, comprehension and temperament are the most important. These people were able to cultivate to the spirit transformation realm at the age of 13 or 14. It can be seen that their talents are excellent, but what I value more is their temperament. Especially when facing you and me just now, they always maintain vigilance. This is very good. Old Wood ridiculed, "It's rare to see you talk so much." Old Bones lowered his eyes and remained unmoved. Old Wood continued, "Then who do you think is the best among the 4? "These 2. Old Bones pointed at 2 of them and said. The 2 he pointed at were Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi. Old Wood nodded as expected and said, "Who do you think is better? This girl's talent is the best I've seen in my life. Can be called a shocking talent. This youth's cultivation talent is not as good as hers, but his physical body is strong and his spiritual power has even opened a spiritual space. His future path is even wider. It can be said that each has their own merits." Old Bones said slowly, "Then who do you think will last longer?" Old Bones pondered for a moment and said, "I can't say for sure." Old Wood laughed and said, "Then let's make a bet. Let's bet on who can last longer. I heard that you recently created a black bone doppelganger. Lend it to me for a few days to study." "So it's my black bone doppelganger." Old Bones flicked his sleeves. "Old Bones, you can't say that. Let's make a bet. If I lose, I'll lend you my gold." "Huh?" Old Bones raised his eyelids and looked at Old Blockhead in surprise. He was naturally aware that Big Gold was the Old Blockhead's precious treasure, and it was a puppet that the Old Blockhead had spent countless painstaking efforts to create. Normally, the Old Blockhead wouldn't even let others take a look at it. Old Bones nodded. "All right, I'll bet with you. Then I'll bet on this little girl." Old Blockhead hurriedly said as if he was afraid that Old Bones would go back on his word. Old Bones' eyelids drooped as he said, "Fine, I'll bet on this young man." Then he sat by the pool and dozed off, while Old Blockhead began to pace back and forth. Leng Shiqi and the other 3 were still quietly staying in the pool, absorbing the ancient secret spring. Their auras were getting stronger and stronger. A moment later, Delta Origi's spirit energy suddenly increased, and she directly stepped into the 2nd level of the spirit transformation realm. Following closely behind were Yushu and Xiongming, and the last to break through was Leng Shiqi. This was not the end. After about an hour, Delta Origi broke through to the 3rd level of the spirit transformation realm. At this time the other 3 were much slower, especially Leng Shiqi, who only broke through after almost 2 hours. Seeing this, Old Blockhead revealed a smile and looked at Old Bones proudly. Old Bones' eyelids were still lowered and he didn't pay attention to him. Time continued to pass, and after 6 hours, Delta Origi's cultivation had reached the 4th level of the spirit transformation realm. However, her face was a bit red and she would occasionally reveal a painful expression. Yushu and Xiongming's cultivations were stuck at the peak of the 3rd level of the spirit transformation realm, and they were unable to break through. Moreover, their bodies were a bit red as if they had soaked in a hot pool for a long time. The most serious thing was that their bodies were still trembling slightly. It was obvious that they were enduring great pain. However, they clenched their teeth and persevered. They knew that this was the best time to break through to the 4th level of the spirit transformation realm. If they couldn't break through now, it would take a long time in the future. At this moment, Leng Shiqi's state was a bit strange. His cultivation was also stuck at the peak of the third level of the spirit transformation realm, but his expression was very normal. There was no trace of pain on his face and he even seemed to be enjoying it. That's right, Leng Shiqi was indeed enjoying it at this moment. The specks of light formed by the fusion of the dark erosion spring and the blood sea venom could not only cleanse his body and strengthen his foundation, but they could also rapidly increase his spirit energy, causing his cultivation to soar like a rocket. In addition, the golden specks of light continued to fuse with his bones, meridians, and flesh, tempering his body. It was a comprehensive tempering from the inside out. That's why Leng Shiqi was not in a rush to increase his cultivation. Instead, he used the 8 stones method to refine his body. At this moment, Old Wood stopped pacing back and forth and Old Bones also stood up. Both of them looked at the 4 of them with bright eyes. Old Wood said seriously, "They are indeed worthy of coming out of the Blood Mist Island's secret realm. Just their tenacity is extraordinary. If they don't die, their future will be limitless. That brat Xiao Dao is not good at managing the sect, but his thoughts and vision are far better than ours." Originally, he thought that aside from the Delta Origi, the other 3 would have already been unable to bear the pain and left the pool. Old Bones nodded slightly, agreeing with him. Time passed very quickly, and after another half an hour, Yushu and Xiongming finally broke through to the 4th level of the spirit transformation realm. It was also at this moment that they could no longer endure the pain and jumped out of the pool at the same time. When they came out and saw that the Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi were still in the pool, they frowned. They both knew that the longer they stayed in the pool, the more benefits they would obtain, but the pain would also become more intense. They came out first, which meant that they were not as good as the Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi. However, the 2 of them didn't think too much about it. They sat down and began to consolidate their cultivation, completely ignoring the 2 old men. Old Wood and Old Bones looked at each other and saw satisfaction in each other's eyes. It was within their expectations that Yushu and Xiongming would come out of the pool first. However, they didn't expect that their first reaction after coming out of the pool was not to ask questions or be jealous. Instead, they went straight to consolidate their cultivation. This made the 2 old men think even more highly of them. Then they turned their gazes to the Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi. Their bet was still going on. Time slowly passed and Delta Origi broke through again. She was already at the 5th level of the spirit transformation realm. However, it looked like she wouldn't be able to last much longer. Leng Shiqi also gradually broke through to the 4th level of the spirit transformation realm. Although his cultivation did not increase quickly, his condition was not bad. Only now did his face begin to turn red. Old Wood's old face became more and more gloomy. He seemed to already know the result of the bet. Not long after, Delta Origi could no longer hold on and left the pool. After Delta Origi came out, she first glanced at Leng Shiqi in surprise. Then she also began to consolidate her cultivation like Yushu and Xiongming. Old Bones looked at Leng Shiqi, who was still leisurely soaking in the pool, and said, "Old Wood, you won't go back on your word, right?" Chapter 130. Hearing this, Old Wood's old face turned red. He coughed dryly and said, "This old man naturally won't break the contract. It's just that my gold has some problems recently. I'll lend it to you after it's repaired." Old Bones seemed to have long been accustomed to Old Wood's behavior of going back on his word. He didn't care much and only said a few words. Sure enough, gambling is like a person's character. Old Wood's face turned even redder, but he changed the topic again. "How long do you think this kid can last?" Old Bones looked at Leng Shiqi's red skin and said, "It should be soon." At this time, Leng Shiqi didn't know what was going on outside. All his thoughts were on cultivating his spirit energy and tempering his body. But gradually he discovered a problem that gave him a headache. That was, his 8 stones horizontal training technique was approaching perfection. This 8 stones horizontal training technique was a rank 1 body refining technique. When it was cultivated to perfection, the physical strength was comparable to a spirit cultivator at the 1st level of the pure spirit realm. Leng Shiqi had now cultivated the 8 stones horizontal training technique to the highest level. In addition, he had cultivated many spirit techniques. Now, the spirit energy of his physical body was comparable to a spirit cultivator at the 2nd level of the pure spirit realm. What gave him a headache was that without the support of the technique, he couldn't take the initiative to refine the golden light spots to strengthen his body. Such an opportunity was hard to come by. It was a pity to give it up like this. Leng Shiqi could only secretly shake his head. At this time, It was impossible for a more advanced body refining technique to fall from the sky for him. Next, he could only wholeheartedly improve his spirit energy. After an hour, Leng Shiqi began to show a painful expression. The two old men stared straight at him. After another hour, Leng Shiqi's body gradually trembled. The two old men's eyes were wide open. Obviously, Leng Shiqi's performance was far beyond their expectations. Delta Origi and the others also stopped their training. When they saw Leng Shiqi still in the pool, their expressions were very interesting. Delta Origi's eyes were glowing, Meng Ming's brows were tightly furrowed, and Yushu's jaw was about to hit the ground. At this moment, Leng Shiqi was indeed suffering from boundless pain. However, whether it was refining the demon blood or fusing the beast origin battle rune, the pain he experienced was far greater than what he was experiencing now. Therefore he could still endure it. Boom. The spirit energy in Leng Shiqi's body surged and the spirit pressure around his body increased. His cultivation had finally broken through to the 5th level of the spirit transformation realm. Half an hour later, Leng Shiqi almost couldn't hold on any longer. Just as he was about to jump out, he suddenly had an idea. Then, a wave of spiritual energy emanated from between his eyebrows, and he carefully controlled this spiritual energy to envelop his body. Leng Shiqi immediately felt the pain lessen. He was overjoyed and immediately continued to cultivate. At this moment, the old man who was watching him suddenly sat down again. Old Wood swallowed his saliva and also sat down. They were very clear that Leng Shiqi wouldn't come out until his spiritual energy was exhausted. However, they never imagined that not only was Leng Shiqi's body strong, his spiritual energy was powerful, and he could even control it so finely. Even many spirit mages couldn't control spiritual energy to this degree. Delta Origi secretly clenched her fists, then sat down cross-legged and continued to cultivate. After that, the few of them seemed to have lost track of time. After an unknown period of time, a piu sound was heard. Leng Shiqi finally jumped out of the pool. His cultivation had already reached the peak of the 5th level of the spirit transformation realm. Leng Shiqi could clearly feel the abundant spiritual energy in his body, and he enjoyed this feeling very much. The two old men looked at him expressionlessly. They were already numb from the shock of Leng Shiqi. Oldwood said, "Kid, you're smart. In the end, you even used the Inshur secret spring to consolidate your cultivation." Leng Shiqi knew that the two old men in front of him were definitely not ordinary. He cupped his hands and said, "Seniors?" Unexpectedly, before he could say anything, Oldwood waved his hand and said, "Okay, no need for this nonsense. Just call me Old Wood and Old Bone. Tell me what you're going to call yourselves." Leng Shiqi, Delta Origi, Yushu, Meng Ming. The four of them reported their names. Oldwood glanced at the four of them. His gaze lingered on Leng Shiqi for a moment before he continued to speak. "Since you were able to come out of the Blood Mist Island, you must be smart people. You should be able to more or less guess what the Blood Mist Island is. That's right, the Blood Mist Island is actually a secret realm. It's a small space that our Blood Cloak Pavilion opened up after nearly 1,000 years of accumulation. The purpose is to cultivate peerless geniuses who gather talent, comprehension, temperament, and luck. That is you." When Leng Shiqi heard this, even though he had already guessed it, when he truly knew the truth, a ripple still rose in his heart. "This old man knows that you've experienced many hardships on the Blood Mist Island, but which one of those who have not gone through untold hardships to achieve great things? Moreover, the resources you've enjoyed on the Blood Mist Island are extraordinary. The cultivation methods, spiritual skills, spirit stones, and medicinal pills are all very precious resources. Moreover, the Inshur secret spring and the blood sea poison are all heavenly treasures that can shock a region. You can enjoy them to your heart's content. You should know their benefits better than anyone else." Hearing this, Leng Shiqi and the others nodded inwardly. If the spirit gathering realm was to draw qi into the body, it could be considered to have entered the door of spirit cultivation. The pure spirit stage was to purify spirit power and build a foundation. The spirit transformation stage was a process of accumulation. In the month after Leng Shiqi broke through to the spirit transformation stage, his cultivation progress was very slow. If he had cultivated step by step, he estimated that it would have taken him 2 to 3 months to reach the second layer of the spirit transformation stage. This was under the premise that the spirit power on the Blood Mist Island was extremely dense. It was clear how difficult it was to advance after the spirit transformation stage. However, the four of them had only cultivated in the pool for a few hours, and they had all reached the 4th and 5th layers of the spirit transformation stage. What a terrifying speed. These few short hours were equivalent to several years of their hard work. Thinking about it now, they still felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. Disregarding everything else, just this time was a great opportunity for them. Moreover, they all understood the meaning behind Elder Mu's words. At the beginning, a total of more than 10,000 people had been sent to the Blood Mist Island, and in the end only the 4 of them had come out. They had indeed suffered a lot and even experienced life and death situations. In addition, the Bloodcloth Pavilion had used them as chess pieces and cultivated them like raising poisonous insects, which made them unhappy. However, what they had received was definitely far more than what they had paid. Therefore they had no complaints. Seeing that they all knew what was going on, Elder Mu's eyes flashed with admiration and he continued, "Not only that, but after you enter the sect will also do its best to cultivate you. You are all smart children, so you should understand what this old man means." Then Elder Mu pointed in a direction and said, "There are a few stone rooms over there. Go change your clothes and I'll take you back to the sect." The 4 of them nodded and walked over. After they entered the stone room, Elder Mu sighed. "The younger generation will surpass us in time." However, Elder Mu glanced at him and said, "You still haven't said anything about the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Elder Mu." Chapter 131. Thank you to Still Chi Refinement after 500 years, for the tip of 500 Chidian coins. Lung Shichi walked into the stone room and found that it was very simple. There was nothing but a stone bed, a table and a chair. A few sets of clothes were neatly placed on the stone bed. Lung Shichi lowered his head and looked at himself. Originally he was wearing an ink-flowing robe and a loose white robe. However, during the battle with the Blood Fiend, he activated the Beast Origin battle pattern and destroyed the white robe. Later, he also destroyed the ink robe when he resisted the snakehead's venom. At this moment, Lung Shichi still had a few rags hanging on his body. He looked extremely miserable. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. Then he looked at the clothes on the bed. Maybe it was because he had been wearing black for too long, so he picked a black robe. After a short while he changed and walked out of the stone room. He found that Yushu and Xiong Ming had already come out. Xiong Ming was wearing a dark green robe. He crossed his arms and didn't say a word. Yushu was wearing a white robe. However, his expression was a bit deep, which was different from his usual self. The last one to come out was Delta Origi. She was wearing a green robe casually. She didn't wear any makeup, which made her look even more beautiful. After the 4 came out, they returned to the pool together. Oldwood said, "Come with us first. We'll talk about it while we walk." The 4 could only follow. The sect that opened the Blood Mist Island and nurtured you guys is the Blood Robe Pavilion. When Lung Shichi heard the words Blood Robe Pavilion, he felt that this sect wasn't a proper faction. As expected, Old Blockhead continued, "The Blood Cloak Pavilion is one of the 7 strongest sects in the world on the ranking of sects. It's also famous on the continent. It's the most powerful assassin faction in the Thunderfire dynasty. It has been passed down for over 1,000 years." At this point, Old Blockhead paused and looked at the 4 people's reactions. However, Lung Shichi and the other 3 didn't show any shock or admiration. Instead, they looked a bit dumb as if they didn't understand what he was talking about. This was indeed the case. The world sect ranking that Old Blockhead mentioned, the 7 invincible sects, the continent and the dynasty all sounded very powerful. But ever since Lung Shichi came to this world, he had been staying in the narrow secret realm of the Blood Mist Island. He knew nothing about the outside world. He had no idea what continent he was in, what dynasty he was in, or what year it was. Therefore he wasn't interested in what Old Blockhead said. Instead he thought to himself, "Assassin force? Sure enough, it's not a proper sect." Seeing Lung Shichi and the others like this, Old Blockhead couldn't help but feel a little awkward. He opened his mouth and wanted to continue speaking. Old Bones stopped him in time. Suddenly, 4 thin booklets appeared in his hand and he threw them to Lung Shichi and the others. "Some things about the Blood Clothing Pavilion are recorded here. You can take a look for yourselves." Old Wood's mouth moved slightly at this moment, but he didn't make a sound. He condensed his voice and transmitted it into Old Bones' ears. "Old Bones, you're undermining me. A person who doesn't even have a gambling sense, why would he need a platform?" Not long after, the 2 old men brought Lung Shichi and the others to a huge stone door. Old Bones said, "Get ready." Lung Shichi and the others were all puzzled. What did they have to prepare for? Boom, boom. The stone door was pushed open by Old Bones with a heavy sound. He then said, "Get ready to welcome the light." As soon as Old Bones finished speaking, the stone door was completely opened and a ray of sunlight shone in. A second ray, a third ray, a 100th ray. Countless rays of sunlight shone in. Lung Shiqi couldn't help but turn his head and subconsciously cover his eyes. However, he still took the initiative to welcome the long-awaited light. After they got used to it, they took the initiative to walk out of the stone door. Feeling the faint warmth of the sunlight on their bodies, Lung Shiqi felt even happier than reaching the 5th level of the spirit transformation realm. Because he hadn't seen sunlight for almost 2 years. After a long while, they finally recovered from that warm feeling and began to look around. Lung Shiqi looked around and found that they were at the top of a mountain. The strange thing was that this mountain looked like a pillar that pierced the sky. It was a bit like a pillar that had been enlarged countless times. He couldn't help but wonder, how do we get down? But at this moment, a sudden shout attracted his attention. Lung Shiqi turned around and saw Yushu running to the edge of the cliff and shouting loudly. There was even a faint echo coming back. Yushu then looked up at the sky and laughed. Ha ha ha, ha ha, I'm finally out. I'm out? Lung Shiqi didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Yushu. However, he didn't say anything. He knew that Yushu had too many things buried in his heart, and it was good to let them out. After a while, Yushu walked back with a relaxed expression. Lung Shiqi had a familiar smile on his face. Old Wood chuckled and said, "Kid, you're quite interesting. Let's go back to the sect." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his sleeve and a powerful gust of wind swept up Lung Shiqi and Delta Origi. In the next moment, Old Blockhead actually leaped down the cliff with them, and he stepped into the air and tore through the sky. Old Bone followed closely behind with Yushu and Hungming. At this moment, Lung Shiqi's heart was in turmoil. He was shocked and curious. He wanted to know what realm the old man who had carried him was at. Blood Cloak Pavilion, Bloodkill Hall. There were several people sitting in the hall. They were all dressed in blood-red robes and wore masks of various shapes. The masks covered their entire faces, not even revealing their eyes. It was impossible to see their appearances. There was one person sitting on the highest seat in the hall. There was only a single blade mark on his mask. This person was the current pavilion master of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Hateful Blade. To Hateful Blade's left sat the vice pavilion master, Ink Frost Ghost. His mask was covered in irregular black ink as if it was made from splashed ink. To Hateful Blade's right stood another person. His mask was carved with an eerie bone mountain. At this moment, he was carefully polishing a strangely shaped bone in his hand. He was the first elder of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Bone Devil. Further down, there was a row of seats neatly arranged. Upon closer inspection, there were 9 of them. However, only 6 of them were seated. There were 3 empty seats, the first, second, and 8th seats. The 6 people were all sitting upright, not even daring to breathe loudly. Everyone in the hall was waiting. They were waiting for the 2 old men and the people they had brought with them. Not long after, 2 thunderous sounds rang out. Everyone turned to see Old Wood and Old Bone bringing Lung Shiqi's group of 4 down from the sky. Chapter 132. Lung Shiqi's group of 4 followed the 2 elders into the Bloodkill Hall. However, the 4 of them were still a bit dumbfounded. They were clearly still in shock at the 2 elders' heaven-defying abilities. When the people in the hall saw the 2 elders enter, they all stood up to welcome them. Hateful Blade and Ink Frost lowered their heads slightly. Bone Devil immediately put away the bone in his hand and respectfully bowed. The others also bowed. Old Blockhead casually waved his hand and condensed his voice into a line to explain the situation. Then he walked to a corner of the hall. After hearing the 2 elders' words, everyone's gaze fell on Lung Shiqi. As soon as Lung Shiqi entered the hall, he felt waves of gloomy air surge through his body, causing him to shiver. At the same time, several pairs of eyes instantly fell on him. Although they were clearly invisible, they made him feel as if there was a substantial pressure on him. It was as if there was a large stone pressing down on his heart, making it difficult for him to breathe. Lung Shiqi secretly circulated his spirit energy and felt a bit better. He raised his head and saw the 3 people at the front. He thought to himself, according to the booklet, those 3 should be the Pavilion Master, Hateful Blade, the Vice Pavilion Master, Ink Frost, and the Disciplinary Elder, Bone Devil. As for those people, they should be the Blood Garment Pavilion's top assassins, the Netherworld Blood Garment Assassins. After the 4 of them stood still, Hateful Blade's cold voice rang out. You already know about what happened on Blood Mist Island. From now on, the 4 of you are disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Furthermore, the pavilion will use all of its resources to nurture you. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi and the others didn't reveal any joy. This was because they had a question in their hearts. Just as Leng Shiqi was hesitating about whether or not to ask, Hengming asked, "What do we need to pay?" Hateful Blade's face was covered by a mask, so his expression couldn't be seen. He only said one word, loyalty. Disciple Yushu greets the pavilion master. As soon as Hateful Blade finished speaking, Yushu directly knelt on the ground and said loudly, "Disciple Hengming greets the pavilion master." Hengming quickly followed. Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi looked at each other. "Very good. In that case, Yushu, you will be my disciple." After Hateful Blade finished speaking, Yushu's body suddenly trembled. He raised his head in surprise. He understood that from now on, he was the direct disciple of the pavilion master. With the pavilion master's personal guidance and an endless supply of cultivation resources, it was as if he could already see a bright future ahead of him. He raised his head, cupped his fists and said, "Disciple pays his respects to master." Hateful Blade gently waved his hand and did not speak. Yushu obediently retreated to the side and secretly glanced at Leng Shiqi and the others. He knew that among the four, Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi were the best, but the pavilion master chose him first, which made him feel strange. Delta Origi? This girl is fated to be with me, so she will be my disciple. Bone Demon's hoarse voice sounded. He had decided to take Delta Origi as his disciple. Delta Origi stepped forward and said crisply, "Thank you, master." The last to speak was the vice pavilion master, Ink Frost Ghoul. He first looked at Leng Shiqi and then turned to look at Hengming. He seemed to be hesitating. Leng Shiqi was also slightly nervous at this time. He was also a little uneasy that Hateful Blade and Bone Demon had given up on him one after another. According to the information he knew, the three people with the highest authority in the Blood Garment Pavilion were the three above. However, 4 of them had come out. If no one took in 2 disciples, then one of them would not be able to become a disciple of the highest authority. The remaining person would have to become a disciple of one of the underworld Blood Garment assassins. Although these people were also experts who could intimidate a region, there was still a big gap between them and the 3 above. However, things would always develop in a bad direction. Ink Frost Ghoul chose Hengming in the end. Leng Shiqi was the best in the Blood Mist Island's secret realm, but no one showed any interest in him. Leng Shiqi sighed in his heart, but his face was still calm. He might have less resources than the other 3 in the future, but he had the system. This mysterious existence made him confident that he would be stronger than them. Then again, he might have more freedom if he became a disciple of one of the underworld Blood Garment assassins. It was not unacceptable. Thinking of this, Leng Shiqi's face became even more calm. Seeing Leng Shiqi like this, Old Wood and Old Bone had a trace of admiration in their eyes. At this time, Hateful Blade said to the 6 underworld assassins, "You guys come." Whoosh. As soon as Hateful Blade finished speaking, one of them immediately stood up. His mask was a strong green demon. "I see that this kid's body is very strong. He's very suitable to walk the path of body cultivation. I'll take him." At this time, the person sitting in the 3rd seat stood up and said, "Ridiculous. Green Demon, your broken technique made you neither human nor ghost. You still want to harm others? Young man, I'm Leng Yu. You and I are quite fated. Why don't you become my disciple?" Leng Yu's mask faintly showed a gloomy expression. "Bullshit." At this moment, a deep voice suddenly came from outside the door. Then a slightly plump man rushed into the hall in a hurry. The person instantly appeared in front of Leng Shiqi. He put his hands on his waist like a woman on the street who was about to quarrel. However, when he saw the 2 old men, he immediately bowed deeply. Old Bone nodded expressionlessly. The person immediately put his hands on his waist again and said to Leng Yu without any politeness, "He's not fated to be your disciple. I want this kid." At this time, Leng Shiqi also saw that there were dozens of faces with different expressions on the mask on the person's face. Upon closer inspection, those faces seemed to be alive. Some of their eyeballs were even moving slightly. It looked very strange and a little creepy. Leng Yu's body suddenly emitted a trace of coldness and said coldly, "Wuxiang, what do you mean? You don't understand what I mean? Brainless thing." Wuxiang muttered in a low voice. However, although his voice was low, everyone present could hear it very clearly. Leng Shiqi couldn't see Leng Yu's expression, but he could imagine that Leng Yu's expression was not good at this moment. "Wuxiang, you dare to be so arrogant in front of the 2 pavilion elders and pavilion master?" Leng Yu said in a low voice. Wuxiang waved his hand and said, "Put away your little thoughts. In the blood clothing pavilion, strength is respected. I'm stronger than you, so this kid will be my disciple. If you're not convinced, the two of us can go out and fight." Leng Yu seemed to choke. After a while, she squeezed out a sentence from between her teeth. You only dare to be arrogant a little when Hua Luiwei isn't here." Wuxiang laughed. "Haha, you're using Hua Luiwei to pressure me. You should understand that as long as the two of us are here, you'll never be able to be arrogant." "Enough." Leng Yu opened her mouth to say something, but Pavilion Master Hen Dao spoke first. Wuxiang and Leng Yu immediately closed their mouths and returned to their seats. Wuxiang casually sat in the first seat. The others also didn't say anything. "This kid will be Wuxiang's disciple." "Disperse," ordered Hen Dao. Leng Shiqi muttered inside, "This Wuxiang doesn't seem very reliable." But before he could recover, one of his arms was suddenly grabbed, and then the scene in front of him rapidly flew away. He had been directly dragged out of the Bloodkill Hall by Wuxiang and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Chapter 133. After a while, Leng Shiqi was dragged by Wuxiang to a place called Wuxiang Palace. Leng Shiqi did not have time to observe the blood clothing pavilion and was dragged along in a daze. Wuxiang did not slow down after entering the palace. Along the way he encountered several people in gray who respectfully called out, "Lord Wuxiang," and looked at Leng Shiqi strangely. In the end, Wuxiang directly dragged Leng Shiqi into a hall before putting him down. Leng Shiqi finally breathed a sigh of relief. His whole body was sore, especially his arms, which were almost numb. Wuxiang put down Leng Shiqi and muttered to himself, "Fortunately, I came back in time. Otherwise, all the good seedlings would have been taken away. This boy is the last one left. He must have the worst aptitude. Alas, I was still one step too late." Leng Shiqi's eyes twitched a few times. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. "You can just think this in your heart. You don't have to say it out loud." "Hey, by the way, what's your name again?" Wuxiang suddenly asked. Leng Shiqi was speechless. "Disciple Leng Shiqi." Wuxiang said, "Leng Shiqi? The name is not very good, but it doesn't matter. Maybe it will be changed soon. Since you can come out of the Blood Fog Island, you must be extraordinary. Come, let me take a closer look." After saying this, Leng Shiqi immediately felt a deep gaze penetrating his body. It made him shiver as if his secret had been seen through. Interesting. You're not simple, kid." Wuxiang suddenly stood up and walked around Leng Shiqi a few times. Finally he leaned close to Leng Shiqi and whispered. Leng Shiqi's heart tightened when he heard this. He was really afraid that Wuxiang would see through his secret. At this moment, the sound of light footsteps came from outside. Wuxiang returned to his seat and pretended to be righteous. Leng Shiqi turned his head and saw a petite woman walk in. This woman was also dressed in red, and the sleeves and collar of her red dress were embroidered with black patterns. She was also wearing a mask on her face, and on it was a drawing of a soaring Qing Yuan. After the woman came in, she subconsciously glanced at Leng Shiqi, and then respectfully said to Wuxiang, "Master." When Leng Shiqi heard this, his heart skipped a beat. This woman was actually his senior sister. Wuxiang nodded. "Suwan, this is your junior martial brother, Leng Shiqi. In a few days, you will be in charge of guiding him in his cultivation." "Huh?" Suwan turned to look at Leng Shiqi. She didn't seem too willing. At this moment, even though Leng Shiqi couldn't see Suwan's face, he could clearly feel the disdain in her eyes. "Master, this disciple is currently trying to break through the bottleneck of the spirit aperture realm. I'm afraid I don't have time to take care of junior martial brother," Suwan said with a bit of difficulty. Wuxiang said, "You have to understand your master. Master has also been trying to break through the bottleneck. I really don't have time to guide Leng Shiqi." When she heard this, Suwan's body trembled. She said in shock, "Master, you've already touched upon the bottleneck?" Wuxiang said in a low voice, "Correct. This disciple congratulates Master. I've only found the right path. Who knows when I'll be able to break through. Don't worry. Since you're guiding Leng Shiqi, I'll give you a 4-star mission. I won't treat you unfairly." "Thank you, Master." Suwan finally agreed. Wuxiang waved his hand. "All right, take him away first." "Yes." Leng Shiqi, who was listening from the side, was confused. He could hardly understand what they were talking about. He only knew that he seemed to be despised by these two people. In the end, he could only ask to be excused and leave with Suwan. Right after he left, Wuxiang's voice suddenly appeared in his mind. Disciple Master forgot to tell you. Your background is a top secret of the Blood Garment Pavilion. You absolutely cannot reveal it to anyone. If anyone asks, just say that I picked you up from the outside. When Leng Shiqi heard this, he helplessly nodded, indicating that he understood. At the same time, he felt that this cheap master of his was even more unreliable. After the two of them left, Su Wan said, Leng Shiqi, is it? Yes, Senior Sister Su. Leng Shiqi replied. I'll take you to formally enter the sect first. Watch more and ask less, understand? Junior Marshal Brother understands. Also, my surname isn't Su. At this moment, Leng Shiqi felt a bit of a headache. He felt that since leaving Blood Mist Island, the people he met didn't seem to be easy to get along with. But there was nothing he could do. He could only obediently follow Su Wan. Because they were walking normally this time, Leng Shiqi met quite a few people. He was also in the mood to observe his surroundings. The Blood Garment Pavilion was located in a huge valley. The entire building leaned towards darkness. Along the way, everyone he saw was wearing a mask. Moreover, they were all in a hurry. Even if they bumped into someone, they wouldn't give you a second glance. Leng Shiqi was the only one with his face exposed. This made him have the urge to cover his face. According to the booklet Elder Bone gave him, the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion had a strict hierarchy. First were the people wearing gray clothes. Their clothes looked very cheap and their masks only covered half of their faces. These people were the lowest level servant disciples. They were all in the pure spirit realm. Next were the people wearing black clothes. They all wore black masks that revealed their mouths and eyes. However, the masks didn't have any patterns. After a servant disciple broke through to the spirit transformation realm and successfully completed an assassination mission, they would be promoted to a black-clothed assassin. From Leng Shiqi's point of view, the black-clothed assassin was equivalent to an outer disciple of an ordinary sect. They weren't valued very much. However, the number of black-clothed assassins was also the highest. This was because the next realm would block most of them outside the door. That was the 4 realms of heaven and man. The 4 realms of heaven and man were Spirit Pulse Realm, Spirit Aperture Realm, Spirit Astral Realm, and Unity of Heaven and Man. The Spirit Pulse Realm was the next realm after the Spirit Transformation Realm. However, most spirit cultivators would be stuck in this realm and wouldn't be able to cross it in their lifetime. The so-called 4 realms of heaven and man meant to break away from the body of a mortal and become an innate body. In fact, whether it was the Spirit Gathering Realm, Pure Spirit Realm, or Spirit Transformation Realm, they were all just building a foundation and accumulating a foundation. Even if a person's aptitude was poor, if they diligently cultivated for a few decades, they could still cultivate to the peak of the Spirit Transformation Realm. However, to break through to the Spirit Pulse Realm, which was above the Spirit Transformation Realm, one must have extraordinary talent. In the Blood Robe Pavilion, only spirit cultivators of the Spirit Pulse Realm had the qualifications to become Blood Robe Assassins and become inner disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion. In the outside world, spirit cultivators of the Spirit Pulse Realm could barely be called experts. However, in the Blood Robe Pavilion, they were only the lowest level of Blood Robe Assassins. This was the foundation of a peak power. The clothes and masks of the Blood Robe Assassins were clearly very exquisite. Moreover, each person's mask had different patterns. Only the color of the patterns on the cuffs and collars were different. Those embroidered with black patterns were at the Spirit Pulse Realm, those with silver patterns were at the Spirit Aperture Realm, and those with gold patterns were at the Spirit Astral Realm. The most frightening people in the Blood Robe Pavilion were the 9 Netherworld Blood Robe Assassins. They were all experts at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm. Leng Shiqi's chief master, Wuxia, was one of the 9 Netherworld Blood Robe Assassins. Leng Shiqi observed as he walked, matching these people with the information in his mind. Not long after, he followed Su Wan into a large hall. Under her lead, Leng Shiqi quickly entered the register and received his identity token, 2 sets of black clothes, a black mask and a monthly salary. From this moment on, he officially became a Blood Robe Pavilion assassin. Chapter 134. As a black-clothed assassin, Leng Shiqi's monthly salary was 5 spirit stones and 2 spirit transformation pills. The spirit transformation pill was a pill that could help spirit cultivators in the spirit transformation realm increase their cultivation. It was very expensive and he was very satisfied with it, but 5 spirit stones was too stingy. One had to know that he used spirit stones like they were rocks on Blood Mist Island. Even now, he still had over 100 spirit stones in his system space. However, there was an advantage to becoming a black-clothed assassin, and that was that he could obtain a rank 3 spirit skill. However, the spiritual skills weren't stored here. As a result, he took the token and followed Sulwan to the Blood Book Hall where the spiritual skills were stored. The masked Lung Shiqi stood in front of the 4-story Blood Book Hall. He was a bit excited. He thought that after entering he would have the opportunity to use his unlimited skill points to cultivate countless spirit skills. His strength would instantly increase. Sulwan said, "You can only enter this place if you have the token. I'll wait for you here. It's best if you hurry." Lung Shiqi nodded and walked into the Blood Book Hall. The door of the Blood Book Hall flashed with a red light. When Lung Shiqi walked in, he took the token in his hand. In an instant, the token emitted the same light and enveloped him. Lung Shiqi walked in. After entering the Blood Book Hall, Lung Shiqi saw more than 10 rows of bookshelves. There was a dazzling array of spirit skills on them. Of course, this was only the first floor of the Blood Book Hall. There were only rank 1 to rank 3 spirit skills. There was also a jade platform next to Lung Shiqi. There was a person standing behind the jade platform. He was wearing a similar black patterned blood robe as Sulwan. "You have a quarter of an hour. Once you've made your choice, report to me." The man said coldly, then turned around and ignored Lung Shiqi. Lung Shiqi subconsciously wanted to touch his nose, but his hand touched the mask. He could only bitterly smile and walk in. Lung Shiqi was very clear about which spiritual technique to choose. The reason why he was able to survive on Blood Fog Island and escape danger time and time again was because of his confusion footwork and ghost parade. These 2 movement techniques were extremely important. However, at his current level, those 2 level 1 movement techniques were gradually unable to keep up with him. In the blood-colored pagoda, the demon monkey on the first floor was already much faster than him. Yen Feilin's body movement spiritual technique was also of a higher level than his. Now that he had come out, he would have to face even greater dangers in this world. Body movement spiritual skills were a must. Therefore, Lung Shiqi's goal was very clear. He wanted to choose a movement technique. The Blood Book Palace had clearly marked out the various spirit techniques, but he didn't look for movement techniques right away. Instead, he picked up the blue sky saber technique that was beside him. After a few breaths, Lung Shiqi frowned. There was no system notification in front of him. When Lung Shiqi picked up the blue sky saber technique, he was surprised to find that there were only 2 pages of content. There was only a simple introduction to the saber technique. In other words, what was displayed here was only an introduction to the technique. Reality was indeed cruel. It immediately shattered Lung Shiqi's hope. He sighed faintly. He could only accept it. Then he shook his head and collected his thoughts. He walked to the body movement spiritual skills section. Body movement spiritual skills could be said to be the type of spirit technique that was extremely difficult to cultivate and rare. However, there were more than 100 body movement spiritual techniques in this place. This showed how deep the Blood Robe Pavilion's foundation was. Lung Shiqi knew that the spirit technique he wanted to choose was a movement technique that could replace the confusion footwork. Only this type of spirit technique could continue to be integrated into Lustful Eyes, and it was best to choose a spirit technique that had characteristics similar to the confusion footwork. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Lung Shiqi went through layers upon layers of selection and selected a level 3 movement technique, Spirit Steps Fluttering. This spirit technique was very similar to the confusion footwork, and the core of it was to control the body. It was just that this spirit technique was very difficult to cultivate, but Lung Shiqi could naturally ignore this. Then Lung Shiqi handed the introduction of the floating feather steps to the person behind the jade platform. The person looked at Lung Shiqi with a bit of surprise. He then pressed his hand on the jade platform. Suddenly the jade platform flashed with spirit light. Names quickly flashed through the spirit light. After 3 or 4 breaths of time, the light suddenly disappeared and a book appeared on the jade platform. It was Floating Spirit Steps. Lung Shiqi was inwardly shocked that there was such a miraculous method. The person said, "This is a rubbing. There are restrictions on it. It will self-destruct in 3 days. It is strictly forbidden to copy it or spread it. Otherwise, 10,000 deaths will be unforgivable." Lung Shiqi nodded heavily. He took the spirit technique and left the Blood Book Palace. When Sulwan saw him come out, she turned and left without saying anything. Lung Shiqi quickly followed. Lung Shiqi gradually realized that the Blood Robe Pavilion was different from the sect he remembered. No matter what they did here, they moved at an extremely fast pace. If they could speak less nonsense, they wouldn't speak more nonsense. Everything they did was done quickly and cleanly. He was quite fond of this. Sulwan brought him back to Formless Palace and arranged a small courtyard for him. She also arranged for a male and female servant disciple to stay in. In the end she said, "I'll come find you tomorrow at noon." Then she simply left. The small courtyard wasn't very big, but it had everything he needed. Jin. Greetings, my lord. At this time, the two servant disciples dressed in gray called out in unison. Originally, they only called the black-clothed assassins senior brother and senior sister. However, they knew that the person in front of them was one of the 9 Blood Robe Pavilion Underworld Blood Robe Assassins, Formless Disciple. They naturally had to call him my lord. This was the difference in status. Lung Shichi didn't argue. He said, "You can all go about your own business." Zhe turned and went to take care of the courtyard. Ajin asked, "What time does my lord eat? What flavor does my lord like?" Lung Shichi muttered. This word sounded very strange to him. He then said, "It doesn't matter. Just send me some food at normal mealtimes." This servant understands. Ajin bowed and retreated. Lung Shichi walked into the largest room in the courtyard. The inside of the room wasn't small. In the middle was a living room. On the 2 sides were a study and a bedroom. What made Lung Shichi feel a little surprised was that there was a cultivation room inside. There seemed to be something like a formation in the cultivation room. The spiritual energy inside was clearly much denser than outside. Lung Shichi originally didn't have much desire for material things. He was very satisfied with having a room like this. He casually walked around and finally sat down on a chair in the study. Because there were many books about this world in the study. Lung Shichi couldn't wait to start flipping through the pages, and he was completely immersed in it. A world of boundless waves, of heroes standing side by side, and of all kinds of splendid scenes unfolded. Chapter 135. Lung Shichi flipped through all kinds of books and scrolls in his study for an entire night. Due to his strong spiritual power, he had a photographic memory. Therefore he could read 10 lines at a glance. He only stopped when Ajin brought him breakfast the next morning. Lung Shichi stretched his back. Even though his body was not weak, sitting here for an entire night made him feel sore all over. After an entire night of cramming, he finally had a basic understanding of this world. This world was a world where spirit cultivators were prevalent. The spirit cultivator lineage had been passed down for over 100,000 years, and the spirit cultivation system was almost perfect. The continent he was in was called the Falling Star Continent. The continent was vast and boundless, and there were many dynasties and spirit cultivator sections. It could be said that it was a place where heroes existed side by side. There was a world sect ranking in the continent, which listed the strongest forces in the Falling Star Continent. They were 3 great dynasties, 4 Saint Spirit regions, 5 extreme sects, 6 path demonic regions, 7 absolutes under heaven, 8 desolate weapon path, 9 great gangs, and 10 Fang aristocratic families. The Blood Cloak Pavilion was one of the top forces in the 7 absolutes under heaven for their assassination techniques. The assassins of the Blood Cloak Pavilion might not be very strong in a head-on battle, but their extremely mysterious assassination techniques made people tremble in fear. Especially the 9 Netherworld Blood Cloak assassins under their command. Each of them was a famous expert who had assassinated one expert after another, causing people's expressions to change when they talked about them. The Blood Cloak Pavilion was located in one of the 3 great dynasties, Wuxia County, one of the 36 counties of the Thunderfire dynasty. The Thunderfire dynasty ruled over 36 counties. According to Lung Shichi's understanding, the area of the Thunderfire dynasty alone was comparable to the country of Wuxia in his previous life. However, there were many spirit cultivator sects in the 36 counties, especially those first-rate and peak forces. They could be said to have occupied a mountain and called themselves kings. They did not put the people of the dynasty in their eyes at all. For example, the Blood Cloak Pavilion. In Wuxia County, the Blood Cloak Pavilion's power far surpassed the Thunderfire dynasty. Sometimes, the words of the Blood Cloak Pavilion were even more effective than the imperial edict of the dynasty. Other than that, Lung Shichi also learned about some rare beasts, heavenly treasures, myths and legends, as well as the distribution of the spirit cultivator sects in the Thunderblaze dynasty. Lung Shichi finished his simple breakfast and couldn't help but smack his lips a few times. It had been almost 2 years since he had eaten real food. Then, he entered the cultivation room and sat down cross-legged, closing his eyes to rest. Although it had only been a little more than a day since he entered the blood-colored tower, he had experienced a lot of things and received a lot of information. He really needed to rest. 4 hours later, when it was close to noon, Leng Shiqi walked out of the cultivation room. He took a light step forward. His body looked a little slow, but in the blink of an eye he was already in front of the door. This was a rank 3 movement technique, floating spirit steps. Great perfection stage floating spirit steps. Leng Shiqi pushed open the door and saw that the small courtyard today was clearly much more orderly than yesterday. Moreover, there were more colorful flowers and plants in the surroundings. Not only were they pleasing to the eye, but they also had a fragrance that made people feel relaxed and happy. Aze and Ajin, who were taking care of the small courtyard, saw Leng Shiqi come out and bowed. "Greetings, Lord." Leng Shiqi nodded casually and the two went back to their own business. Not long after, Sulwan arrived as promised. Without saying a word, she brought Leng Shiqi to the back mountain of Formless Palace. There was a large and beautiful flower garden here. The two walked to the center of the garden before stopping. In the center was an open space with a radius of several tens of feet. The ground was paved with bluestone and there were some deep grooves carved into it. Leng Shiqi didn't know why Sulwan brought him here. It couldn't be that she was here to enjoy the scenery, right? Sure enough, Sulwan lightly clapped her hands and the bluestone under her feet slowly moved, revealing a dark underground cave. Unexpectedly, a person with disheveled hair and messy clothes walked out. Leng Shiqi saw no less than several dozen wounds on his body, but that person's eyes were staring at him like a hungry wolf. His cultivation seemed to be at the middle stage of the spirit transformation realm. Sulwan said, "Lang Chi, kill him and you can live. Moreover, you can take his place as the assassin in black." Lang Chi's eyes faintly glowed with a green light. In the next instant, his hands turned into claws and grabbed at Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi didn't expect Sulwan to do this, but he didn't panic. He skillfully used his confusion footwork and took a step forward. However, Leng Shiqi underestimated Lone Wolf's speed. Lone Wolf suddenly sped up when he was halfway there. Even though Leng Shiqi used his confusion footwork, his clothes were still torn apart. Hiss. Leng Shiqi was startled. He raised his index and middle fingers and two invisible sword chi shot out. He didn't have a sword in his hand, so he used his fingers as a sword. Two rays of unblocking meridian sword chi shot out silently, but Lang Chi also sensed it. He twisted his body at an extremely strange angle and barely dodged one of them. However, one of the rays of unblocking meridian sword chi pierced his skin and entered his back. The sword chi entered his body and sealed off two of his meridians. Even so, Lang Chi's expression didn't change. Wisps of black smoke came out of his index finger and he stabbed out. At this moment, a layer of black smoke appeared under Leng Shiqi's feet. His speed was clearly faster than before. At the same time, his hands turned into pitch-black ghost claws. His right index finger continuously emitted spiritual energy as he pointed forward. When this finger was pointed out, it vaguely contained the power to move mountains. This was a rank 2 spiritual skill, Mountain Crushing Finger. The Mountain Destroyer finger collided with Lang Chi's fingertip. The spirit light from the spirit finger easily destroyed Lang Chi's black silk and directly pierced a bloody hole in his palm. However, Leng Shiqi felt that something was wrong. Sure enough, in the next moment, Lang Chi reached out and grabbed Leng Shiqi's wrist. At the same time, he pulled out a dagger from his waist and fiercely stabbed forward. Not only that, but the black smoke that was destroyed by Leng Shiqi was now attached to the dagger. Leng Shiqi didn't panic in the face of danger. He raised his leg and suddenly kicked out 10 times like the wind. Each kick accurately hit Lang Chi's waist and sent him flying. Rank 2 spiritual skill, Wind-Catching Kick. Seeing that Lang Chi was sent flying, Leng Shiqi didn't want to let him go. He slightly moved his body and activated the floating steps. His movement seemed slow but was actually very fast. Before Lang Chi could react, Leng Shiqi sent out 6 more palm strikes, each of which carried a blazing aura. Rank 2 spiritual skill, 6 Yang Palms. Lang Chi felt the blazing aura around him and twisted his body again. He dodged most of the palms, but 2 of them still landed on his body. He let out a muffled groan. The dagger in his hand flew out and the black smoke quickly formed a black net. However, Leng Shiqi lowered his body and a gray cloud appeared around him. The black net instantly shattered the gray cloud, but Leng Shiqi was nowhere to be seen. Lang Chi immediately felt that something was wrong. He hurriedly turned around, but a dagger had already pierced his heart. Rank 2 spiritual skill, Mysterious Cloud Thrust. Perhaps Sulwan wanted to use Lang Chi to test Leng Shiqi's strength, but Leng Shiqi used him as a tool to hone his spiritual skills. With Leng Shiqi's peak spiritual skills, he was currently invincible among those of the same rank. Furthermore, he was only using spiritual skills that he rarely used and was hiding his true strength. After Lang Chi fell to the ground, the bluestone tiles on the ground began to move again. A black mouth appeared and swallowed Lang Chi's corpse. Immediately after, a series of cracking sounds came from the ground. Not long after, a stream of blood flowed out and flowed along the grooves on the ground. Lung Shichi looked at the flowers and felt that they were even more beautiful. Chapter 136. Clap, clap, clap. Sulwan lightly clapped her hands and said, "To be able to catch Master's attention, Junior Lung is truly extraordinary." Now Sulwan finally called him Junior Brother. Lung Shichi knew that Sulwan recognized his strength and said, "Senior Sister Sulwan is too kind." In reality, Lung Shichi was a bit glad that he chose the rank 3 movement skill floating steps yesterday. Otherwise, it would have taken a lot of effort to defeat Lang Chi with just the confusing steps. Take this cultivation technique and cultivate it. If there's anything you don't understand, you can come find me in Qingwan Courtyard. Sulwan handed over an exquisite secret manual and turned to leave, leaving him here. Lung Shichi didn't mind. He lowered his head and saw the words "Blood Slaughter 7 Fiendish Arts" written on the manual. Seeing these words, Lung Shichi trembled. He knew that this was the core cultivation technique of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Only Blood Cloak assassins had the qualifications to cultivate this rank 7 cultivation technique. Currently, Lung Shichi's most powerful cultivation technique, Demonic Beast Technique, was only at rank 3, but Sulwan directly gave him a rank 7 cultivation technique. This made Lung Shichi both surprised and happy. But after he opened the secret manual and glanced at it, he realized that the Blood Slaughter 7 Fiendish Arts in his hand only had the first 3 layers. But even with only 3 layers, it was comparable to a rank 4 cultivation technique. It was enough for him to cultivate to the Spirit Aperture realm. After returning to his courtyard, Lung Shichi locked himself in a cultivation room to study the Blood Slaughter 7 Fiendish Arts. First of all, this cultivation technique had 7 layers. It was said that the 7th layer was the core of this cultivation technique. And this Blood Slaughter 7 Fiendish Arts had 2 characteristics. One was that it could greatly mobilize the body's blood and qi, allowing it to erupt with great power for a short period of time. But this would naturally cause a loss of blood and qi. Lung Shichi muttered to himself, "This is a bit similar to the blood explosion pill I swallowed before." The other characteristic of this cultivation technique was that it could control the body's killing intent for its own use. Baleful qi was an invisible substance that was naturally formed after killing too many people. It was hidden in the body of a person. If there wasn't much killing intent, it wouldn't have much effect. But some people's killing intent had become second nature and condensed a large amount of killing intent. In the end, they could even be devoured by the killing intent and become a blind killing madman. Then, in the end, he could only be eradicated by the various spirit cultivator sects, and at the same time he could also gain a wave of reputation. On the other hand, the Blood Cloak Pavilion was the strongest assassin sect in the Thunderblaze dynasty, perhaps even the entire continent. Every single one of its disciples was covered in blood, so they definitely possessed a lot of baleful aura. The Blood Cloak assassins, the Blood's Blood Slaughter 7 Fiendish Arts to use killing intent. Ants Blood's killing blood, as the Blood's blood. Eschchi. Lung Shichi pondered for a moment. He had killed quite a number of people and demonic beasts on the Blood Fog Island. Therefore he reckoned that he should also have some killing intent. Unfortunately, these 2 characteristics could only be fully displayed at the Spirit Pulse realm. Lung Shichi then used the system to directly cultivate the Blood Slaughter 7 Fiendish Arts and then changed it to his main cultivation technique. A day later, Lung Shichi let out a mouthful of turbid air. At this moment, his cultivation had reached the limit of the 5th level of the Spirit Transformation realm. He could break through the bottleneck of the 6th level at any time, but he was not in a hurry to break through. He then walked out of the cultivation room to find something to eat. Unexpectedly, there was a slightly fat person sitting in the living room. Disciple greets Master. Disciple didn't welcome Master. Lung Shichi quickly bowed. The person who came was Lung Shichi's chief, Master Wuxiang. Wuxiang said indifferently, "It's fine. Master just arrived and knew you were at a critical moment in your cultivation, so I didn't call you. Many thanks for Master's understanding. Oh, your senior sister came to find me yesterday. She has a very high opinion of you and directly gave you the Blood Slaughter 7 Fiendish Arts. However, this cultivation method is very difficult to learn. I was afraid you wouldn't understand, so I came to take a look. I didn't expect you to be able to use it so freely. You are worthy of being one of the winners of the Blood Fog Island competition. Leng Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. Wuxiang had come yesterday. Didn't that mean he had made his master wait here for a day and a night? However, from Wuxiang's tone, he didn't seem to blame him. Instead, he seemed to admire him. At this point, Leng Shiqi's impression of Wuxiang had changed a bit. He wanted to say a few more words of praise, but Wuxiang continued, Master came here for another matter. Please tell me, Master. Yes, I've been thinking about it for the past 2 days. I've decided to send you to the next pavilion to gain some experience. Wuxiang turned to look at Leng Shiqi as if to see his reaction. Pavilion? Leng Shiqi knew that although the Blood Cloak Pavilion had the title of the strongest assassin force, not to mention the entire continent, just the Thunderblaze dynasty was vast. The Blood Cloak Pavilion headquarters naturally couldn't cover such a large area, so the Blood Cloak Pavilion had branches in some counties. However, the resources and treatment of the branches were naturally not as abundant as the main pavilion, so many disciples of the branches were fighting to get into the main pavilion, but he was going to be sent to a branch. Wasn't this equivalent to being sent away? However, Leng Shiqi didn't feel anything special. Instead, he felt that it was beneficial to him. Although he had only stayed in the main pavilion for 2 days, he always felt a sense of restraint. Moreover, he was carrying a lot of secrets. If he stayed for too long, he might be discovered by those big shots. If he was sent to a branch, he would be able to stretch his hands and feet. Therefore, his mentality and expression were very natural as he said, I'll follow Master's orders. All of this fell into Wuxiang's eyes. He saw that Leng Shiqi was calm and didn't seem to have any grudges in his heart, so his evaluation of him increased by 2 points. Therefore he said, Very good. Then you can pack up. Tomorrow I will send someone to send you to the Donglin County branch. Remember, Master also has requirements for you. You must break through to the 4 realms of celestial being and be promoted to a Blood Cloak assassin within a year. If you can do it, Master will give you a great opportunity. If you can't do it, you can be a little assassin for the rest of your life. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi thought to himself, he really has other intentions for this arrangement. However, it is somewhat difficult to break through to the spiritual pulse realm of the 4 realms of celestial being within a year. Moreover, it seems that the promotion of a Blood Cloak assassin requires not only the cultivation of the spiritual pulse realm, but also a lot of sect contributions. This mission seems to be not dangerous, but it is actually very difficult. However, Leng Shiqi still said solemnly, Disciple understands. And Master is very satisfied with your temperament. This is Master's gift for you to become my disciple. Let's meet again in a year. Wuxiang threw a small bag the size of a palm and left. Leng Shiqi picked up the small bag and looked slightly surprised. Chapter 137. Donglin County was located in the easternmost part of the Thunderfire dynasty. It was one of the counties near the sea. Because this county was located in the coastal area, it established trade with many overseas spirit cultivator forces. It could obtain a huge amount of precious resources that could not be produced on the mainland. Therefore, Donglin County could be said to be abnormally prosperous. However, more than half of this prosperity was controlled by the major forces in Donglin County. On the contrary, the Thunderfire dynasty did not gain much. This was because there was a top force in Donglin County, the Mountain Sea Sect. The Mountain Sea Sect, one of the 9 great sects in the world. The Mountain Sea Sect had a deep relationship with overseas spirit cultivators. They controlled almost half of the overseas trade routes. Not only were they strong, but they were also rich. With this local snake, even the strong Thunderfire dynasty could not reach in. Therefore, the deterrence of the Thunderfire dynasty in Donglin County was far inferior to that of the Mountain Sea Sect. This was also the place where the dynasty and the spirit cultivator sects formed. Near a small remote city in Donglin County, there was a small mountain called the Wind Ridge. Because passers-by often heard the faint sound of ghostly cries coming from inside, and there were even rumors that there were evil spirits here. Gradually this place became desolate. Moreover, this small mountain did not have a spirit vein, and the spirit energy was very thin. No spirit cultivator would come here, so the Wind Ridge became a deserted place. However, today 2 men in black, one tall and one short, came here. The tall man was a young man in his 20s. At this time he said, Junior Brother Leng, this is the Donglin County branch. Senior Brother Fan, there are few people here. It is indeed a good place. The short youth added. These 2 people were Leng Shiqi and Fan Jingchu, who had rushed over from the Blood Clothing Pavilion's main pavilion. Fan Jingchu was originally a disciple of the Donglin County branch. This time he went to the main pavilion to run errands, but was directly captured by Wuxia to lead the way for Leng Shiqi. It had been 7 or 8 days since the two of them set off from the main pavilion. They had been riding on spirit horses all the way until they finally arrived here. Originally, Leng Shiqi had planned to see the local customs of this world, but in the end he only ate a nose full of dust. Fan Jingchu continued, "There is a maze here. Junior brother Leng, you must follow me closely later." Leng Shiqi nodded. Understood. After that, Leng Shiqi followed Fan Jingchu through many twists and turns, and after 2 incense sticks worth of time, they entered a huge space. Leng Shiqi looked around and was shocked to find that he was inside the mountain. In other words, the Blood Garment Pavilion had hollowed out this small mountain. The entire space was oval-shaped and had 3 floors from bottom to top. Each floor had many rooms and halls. There were many people coming and going, but most of them were assassins in black. They also saw Leng Shiqi and Fan Jingchu, but most of them just glanced at them and didn't pay much attention. Some of the more observant people looked at the small pouch on his waist. Fan Jingchu said, "Let's go. I'll take you to the Grand Pavilion leader first." Guizhu, the Grand Pavilion leader of the Blood Garment Pavilion branch in Donglin County, was an old man more than 100 years old. He was once a master in the realm of oneness of heaven and men. It was said that decades ago, Guizhu was also one of the 9 Nether Blood Garment assassins of the Blood Garment Pavilion. But later he was seriously injured in a mission and fell to the realm of Gang Spirit Realm. Since then he took the initiative to leave the General Pavilion and came to Donglin County to take care of the branch. "Greetings, Grand Pavilion Leader." Leng Shiqi and Fan Jingchu saluted together. Guizhu raised his arm and a gentle force helped the two of them up. His voice was very soft but clearly entered their ears. "Fan Jingchu, you've worked hard this time. Go and get 2 more spirit transformation pills." Fan Jingchu's face lit up and he left. Seeing this, Leng Shiqi knew that Guizhu must have something to say to him. Guizhu's eyes stayed on Leng Shiqi for a long time, which made his back numb. After a while he said, "Wuxia has told me your identity." Leng Shiqi was shocked. He remembered that Wuxia had said that his identity was top secret and could not be disclosed to anyone. Why did Wuxia tell others? "Don't be surprised. I participated in the opening of the secret realm of the Blood Mist Island." Guizhu's words left a thunder in Leng Shiqi's heart again. He continued, "This is the reason why Wuxia sent you to me. Only those who know your secret will protect it. But I won't take care of you. From tomorrow on, you'll take tasks and get used to the pace of the Blood Garment Pavilion as soon as possible." "I understand. I've arranged a room for you. Go and have a rest. I'll take my leave." Leng Shiqi put away all his thoughts and left. Returning to his own stone room, Leng Shiqi first took a look around. The stone room wasn't big, but it had everything that he needed. Unfortunately, there was no cultivation room like the main pavilion, so the spirit energy was much weaker. However, he did not complain. Instead, he sat cross-legged and touched the small bag at his waist with his right hand. Then, a few dry rations and a bag of water suddenly appeared in his hand. After all, these things were not taken out from the system space but from the small bag. The small bag was given to him by Wuxia before he left. It was a mustard seed bag. This mustard seed bag had a space the size of a small house, and there were some things stored inside. For example, spirit stones, pills, daily necessities, and even some gold and silver. However, the value of these things added together was not as valuable as the mustard seed bag. From what he knew, the mustard seed bag could be said to be a priceless treasure. Only people with high status were qualified to have it. Leng Shiqi liked the mustard seed bag very much. This way, some ordinary things could be stored in it. The truly important things were stored in the system space. However, he did not dare to use the mustard seed bag in front of others. He still understood the principle that a man's wealth was his own ruin. Although his cultivation and strength were considered top-notch among his peers in this world, he was still a weakling who had not reached the celestial realm. The next day, Leng Shiqi came to the central square. This was the place to accept missions, and it was also a place with a lot of people. There were several large boards erected in the middle of the plaza, displaying a large number of missions according to their difficulty. Leng Shiqi walked to a board in the corner. As a black-clothed assassin, he was only qualified to accept 1-star and 2-star missions. Leng Shiqi's eyes narrowed slightly as he carefully scanned the missions one by one. The targets of these missions were all below the celestial realm. Most of them were targets of the spirit transformation realm, and a few of the pure spirit realm or ordinary people were people with high status. Leng Shiqi planned to take a 2-star mission to practice, preferably one that was not far away and had high contribution points. The contribution points of the Blood Cloak Pavilion were called blood drops. Blood drops were very useful. Not only could they be used to exchange for various cultivation resources and information, but they could also be used to buy higher-level stone rooms. For example, the stone rooms on the 2nd floor had spirit-gathering formations, and the spirit chi in them far exceeded that of ordinary stone rooms. In the future, when he was promoted to a blood-clothed assassin, he would need as many as 1,000 blood drops. In addition to some gold, silver, and spirit stones, the highest reward for a 2-star mission was about 50 to 60 blood drops. Therefore, from now on, Leng Shiqi had to start saving up some blood drops. After looking around, Leng Shiqi tore off one of the missions, which immediately attracted the attention of others. Chapter 138. The mission Leng Shiqi accepted was to assassinate Bao Pengyi, the leader of the Three Swords gang in Shangyang City of Donglin County. The reason he accepted this mission was because it was very close. Shangyang City was a small city next to the Yin Wind Ridge and was only a few dozen kilometers away. The target was Bao Pengyi, who was at the 8th level of the spirit transformation realm. Although Leng Shiqi was only at the 5th level of the spirit transformation realm, he still had some confidence. The Three Swords gang was not a spirit cultivation sect, but a street gang in Shangyang City. Although Bao Pengyi was the leader, he was still a rogue cultivator with no one to guide him. Whether it was cultivation methods or spirit techniques, he was far inferior to a disciple of a spirit cultivation sect. Especially someone like Leng Shiqi, who had several cultivation methods and a lot of spirit techniques at the peak of the spirit transformation realm. In terms of spirit force foundation and combat strength, he was no worse than a rogue cultivator at the 8th level of the spirit transformation realm. Moreover, the reward for this mission was good. There were all kinds of spirit stones and pills as well as 50 blood drops, so Leng Shiqi thought this mission was very suitable for him. When he tore off the mission, he suddenly felt dozens of gazes fall on him. Leng Shiqi turned around and those people also withdrew their gazes, which made him feel a bit strange. Then he gently shook his head and prepared to do the mission. After Leng Shiqi left, the dozens of people there immediately began to whisper. "Who is this person? His figure looks very unfamiliar. I know he came with Fan Jingchu yesterday and went to see the head pavilion leader." "Oh? The head pavilion leader saw him? It seems that this person's identity is not simple. I think he might be from the main pavilion. So he was sent down. I'm afraid he did something wrong in the main pavilion. No wonder he accepted Bao Pengyi's mission. He's young and ignorant. This mission's reward is so good, but no one has accepted it for so long. He actually dared to accept it. It seems that he never inquired about that bastard Bao Pengyi. I'm afraid he's going to suffer. Who cares about him?" Of course, Leng Shiqi didn't know that people were talking about him behind his back. After accepting the mission and registering, he set off for Shangyang City with his spirit sword on his back and a scimitar at his waist. He ran as fast as he could and bought a horse from a small town along the way. By the time he reached Shangyang City, it was already night and the city gates were already closed. Leng Shiqi had no choice but to use Gaia Hand to sneak into the city. Unfortunately, he lost his horse not long after he bought it. After entering the city, he walked on the empty streets and picked up a map. Following the map, he arrived at a coffin shop. Dong dong dong, Leng Shiqi knocked on the door according to a strange pattern. Not long after, someone cursed from inside, "Why are you knocking in the dark? Are you in a hurry to buy yourself a coffin?" The door opened a crack, revealing a head with black and white hair and a mustache. Leng Shiqi didn't say anything. He took out his token and put it away. The person looked around and immediately led Leng Shiqi in. "Mao Kai greets the black-clothed envoy." The person bowed. Leng Shiqi looked at the person. The person was short and his eyes were narrowed into slits. He looked like a money grubber. He looked to be in his 40s or 50s, but his back was hunched. He was even shorter than the 13-year-old Leng Shiqi. This person was the informant of the blood-clothed pavilion in Shangyang City. Anyone who carried out a mission near Shangyang City could ask him for some information. Of course it was paid. When you accepted the mission, there would only be some superficial information in the mission. For example, Leng Shiqi's mission was to assassinate Bao Pengyi of the Three Swords Association. However, there was no information on how powerful the Three Swords Association was, how many guards Bao Pengyi had, or what he was good at. If Leng Shiqi wanted to successfully complete the mission, he had to collect enough information, so he found Mao Kai. He said straightforwardly, I need information on the Three Swords Association and Bao Pingyi. Envoy, please wait a moment. I will be back soon. Mao Kai said sleepily and then turned into another room. In less than 15 minutes, Mao Kai came out with several scrolls of information. He picked up one of them and said, this information records the general information of the small gangs in Shangyang City, including the Three Swords Association. Envoy, this is your first time here. I will give you this information with both hands. Leng Shiqi looked at Mao Kai with interest and said, okay, I will accept this. You can name the rest. Haha, listen to me. This was all the information about the Three Swords Gang's leaders, including their residences, cultivation levels, cultivation methods, and spirit techniques. It only cost 1 spirit stone. This is detailed information on Bao Pingyi. It costs 2 spirit stones. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi frowned. The price of this information was beyond his imagination. He originally thought that he could buy the information with money, but he didn't expect it to cost spirit stones. If he bought these 2 scrolls of information, he would have to spend 3 spirit stones. However, as an assassin in black, his monthly salary was only 5 spirit stones. If he calculated it this way, the assassins in black would have to pay for these 2 missions. Leng Shiqi narrowed his eyes and emitted cold air. This was true cold air coming from Leng Shiqi's feet. In an instant, the temperature in the room plummeted. Mao Kai couldn't help but shiver and said, Envoy, why are you doing this? You know the answer. Do you think I am young and ignorant? I think that the spy in Shangyang City can do a good job even if it was someone else, Leng Shiqi said coldly. His right hand gripped the handle of the scimitar at his waist and slowly pulled out the blade. Envoy, please spare me. Envoy, please spare me. Mao Kai felt Leng Shiqi's killing intent and immediately knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. Leng Shiqi pulled out even more of his scimitar. No, no, no. I will give all the information to you for free. How can that be? Leng Shiqi let go of the scimitar handle and withdrew his cold air. You are in this business. How can I take your things for free? Just tell me how much you should sell them for. I won't give you a penny less. Mao Kai wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and said, Envoy, just give me 300 taels of silver for these 2 scrolls of information. Really? So cheap? Leng Shiqi knew that in this world, a single spirit stone was worth 1,000 taels of gold. Mao Kai had asked for 3 spirit stones earlier, and now he only asked for 300 taels of silver. This was equivalent to reducing the price by 100 times. It was clear that Mao Kai was asking for too much. I won't lie to you anymore. I'll trust you this time. I'll take these 2 scrolls of information. Leng Shiqi took out 300 taels of silver notes from his pocket. These were the notes that Wuxia prepared for him in his mustard seed bag. This. Mao Kai's eyes lit up when he saw the notes. However, he glanced at Leng Shiqi from time to time and seemed to be hesitant. Leng Shiqi handed over the notes and said, This is what you deserve. Take it. Oh, thank you, Envoy, thank you, Envoy. Mao Kai happily took the notes. When he saw that Leng Shiqi was about to leave, he hurriedly said, Esteemed Envoy, I have another service here. I wonder if Esteemed Envoy is interested? Leng Shiqi stopped and said, Let's hear it. Envoy should be going to deal with Bao Pingyi. I grew up in Shangyang City and know the city like the back of my hand. This lowly one can specially design a perfect retreat plan for the esteemed envoy. But this Mao Kai said as he rubbed his thumb and index finger. His meaning was obvious. However, Leng Shiqi directly refused and pushed the door open. Mao Kai's face instantly darkened. He muttered to himself, Where did this brat come from? Why is he acting all high and mighty? At least he was chopped to death by the people of the Three Swords Association. As he spoke, he looked at the notes in his hand and a smile appeared on his face. He can sell that piece of information for 300 taels of silver. He's still too young. Chapter 139. After leaving the coffin shop, Leng Shiqi turned into a small alley, then quietly sneaked into the ground and opened up a small space. The reason why he rejected Mao Kai's suggestion was because Mao Kai's mention of the word, terrain, had reminded him of something. The system map. Ever since the system upgrade unlocked the map function, he had not used it because the map was useless on Blood Fog Island. Only now did he suddenly remember this matter. Leng Shiqi opened the system map, and a circular light screen appeared in front of him. It was basically pitch black, and there was only a thin curved white line at the bottom right corner. He stretched out his hand and drew a few times, and the map was magnified several times. At this time the white line became a route. Lung Shiqi took a closer look. Wasn't this the route he took from the General Pavilion to the Yin Wind Ridge in Donglin County, and then to Shangyang City? It also showed some of the geographical features near the route. He enlarged the map again and pulled it to Shangyang City. He saw that everywhere he went in the city, the nearby terrain was clearly displayed. This map is a little interesting. Looks like I'll have to spend more time studying it in the future, Lung Shiqi muttered to himself. Next, he picked up the few pieces of information he had obtained and carefully read them. The current Shangyang city was controlled by the city lord's mansion, Chinko Hall, and the Three Swords Gang. Chinko Hall and the Three Swords Gang were just small street gangs. They were not considered spirit cultivation sects at all. Even so, they had thousands of gang members. The Thunderblaze dynasty's influence in Donglin County was not strong. The city lord's mansion only had a few hundred city guards, and the quality of the guards was uneven. Therefore, these two gangs did not put the city lord's mansion in their eyes. However, the city lord's mansion was a power of the dynasty after all, so they did not dare to go too far. Chinko Hall and the Three Swords Gang occupied the east and west sides of the city respectively. The Three Swords Gang was able to suppress Chinko Hall because not long ago, the Three Swords Gang had climbed up to the third-rate Heavenly Cloud building. Seeing this, Lung Shiqi felt that this mission was not that simple. He originally thought that it was just to assassinate the leader of a small gang, but he did not expect it to involve a spirit cultivation sect. The difference between a spirit cultivator sect and a small gang like the Three Blades Society was like the difference between heaven and earth. Even the weakest third-rate sect was founded by a spirit aperture realm expert. However, the leader of the Three Blade Gang, Bao Pingyi, was only at the late stage of the spirit transformation realm. Most of his subordinates were just hooligans. Lung Shiqi really couldn't imagine how Bao Pingyi could get involved with a proper spirit cultivation sect like the Heavenly Cloud Pavilion. Lung Shiqi continued to read, but the more he read, the deeper his frown became. The Three Blade Gang had 7 leaders under Bao Pingyi. They were all at the spirit transformation realm and each of them guarded a street. Bao Pingyi, on the other hand, had always been a cautious person who cherished his life very much. He had always holed himself up in his own mansion and rarely went out. He still had over 100 guards in his mansion, all of them spirit cultivators. Every day they would take turns to patrol, and it could be said that not even a fly could enter. In addition, no matter where Bao Pingyi went, there would be 4 spirit transformation realm guards protecting him. They were called the 4 spirit guards, and they would even accompany Bao Pingyi when he was eating or sleeping. These 4 spirit transformation realm cultivators were specially sent by the Heavenly Cloud Pavilion to protect Bao Pingyi. What is so special about this Bao Pingyi that the Heavenly Cloud Pavilion would send 4 spirit transformation realm cultivators to protect him? Lung Shiqi felt that this mission was a bit tricky. Ignoring the guards, Bao Pingyi was too cautious, and there was no way to assassinate him. Even if he used the Hand of the Earth to quietly approach Bao Pingyi, he would still have to face the 4 spirit transformation realm cultivators. Once a fight broke out, it would definitely attract more guards. Lung Shiqi didn't think that he had the strength to take the head of an enemy general from an army of 10,000. While it's dark, I should go check out the area around the Bao mansion. Then he moved towards the location indicated in the intelligence report. Not long after, Lung Shiqi arrived near the Bao mansion. Immediately, the veins in his eyes bulged and his eyes turned green. Byakugan open. As soon as the Byakugan opened, the world in Lung Shiqi's eyes turned gray. Everyone in the Bao mansion was within his sight. The Byakugan was an eye technique with extremely strong detection abilities. It was very suitable for Lung Shiqi's identity as an assassin. In Lung Shiqi's eyes, he quickly found 5 huge sources of spirit energy. They must be Bao Pingyi and his 4 guards. Just as the intelligence report said, these 5 people were indeed standing closely together. Moreover, there were hundreds of spirit cultivators walking back and forth in the Bao mansion. There were almost no blind spots. It would be difficult for an ordinary assassin to even enter the Bao mansion. Then Lung Shiqi used the breath-concealing technique to restrain his aura. His body sank into the ground. Not long after, he arrived at the bottom of the room where Bao Pingyi was, waiting for an opportunity. However, after waiting for a while, the 5 people above didn't move at all. Just as Lung Shiqi was hesitating whether or not he should try to assassinate Bao Pingyi first. In his eyes, suddenly 2 auras that were not weaker than his quickly walked over. Then the sound of conversation came from above. Lung Shiqi quickly suppressed the killing intent in his heart and listened carefully. President. Big brother. Fourth brother, seventh brother, why are you looking for me? Bao Pingyi's voice sounded a little old. President, the people of Qingkou Hall have been too much these days. Yes, especially the two streets where fourth brother and I are. They have been looking for trouble. Today they even smashed my place. You can't even handle such a small matter? Bao Pingyi's tone seemed a little unhappy. President, don't worry. Little Seven doesn't dare to disturb President. It's just that I feel that the City Lord's mansion is about to lose control of Jingshu Street. Our chance has come. Oh? Jingshu Street is one of the most prosperous streets in Shangyang City. Chu Xn Ran is willing to give it up? Hehe, that City Lord Chu has just arrived. He hasn't even suppressed the city guards under him. How can he have the time to manage Jingshu Street? President, while the people of Qingkou Hall haven't noticed, let's make the first move. At this moment, Bao Pingyi was silent for a while before saying, first, tell the brothers to be ready to make a move. However, we can't be anxious. After all, the City Lord's mansion still represents the Thunderblaze dynasty. We can't fall out in front of them. He paused for a moment before saying, secretly leak this information to Qingkou Hall. President, this President is wise. President wants Qingkou Hall to make the first move. Our Three Swords Association is helping the City Lord's mansion eliminate evil. Go, I'll leave this matter to the two of you. The two of them happily agreed. Since this task had fallen on their shoulders, it meant that they could share the profits of Jingshu Street. After hearing all this, Lung Shiqi silently left the Bao residence. He already had a plan to lure Bao Pingyi out of the Bao residence. Chapter 140. At night 2 days later, all the stores on Jingshu Street had already been tightly closed. It wasn't that they didn't want to do business, but there were hundreds of people from the Qingkou Hall and the Three Swords gang gathered on Jingshu Street. Both sides were rubbing their fists. The smell of gunpowder was very strong, as if they could fight at any time. The leaders of the Three Swords gang were Bao Pingyi's two subordinates, Nie Kuan and Ning Qi. They were both at the middle stage of the spirit transformation realm. The Qingkou Hall was not to be outdone. They also had two leaders at the middle stage of the spirit transformation realm, Tianhu and Ringan. At this moment, the four of them were talking bad about each other in front of others. Tianhu of the Qingkou Hall was a burly man. He had the most violent temper. Under Nie Kuan's provocation, he couldn't bear it anymore. He raised the big axe in his hand and chopped down. Tianhu's attack was like a signal. Everyone began to attack at this moment. Ringan wanted to pull him back, but he didn't have time. He could only draw his short sword and face the seventh leader, Ning Qi. A great battle for control of Jingshu Street began. Both sides had accumulated grievances for a long time. Once they started fighting, they instantly became angry and bloodthirsty. Every moment, there were people falling to the ground. However, they knew that the most important part of this battle was the battle between the leaders of both sides. Tianhu brandished his heavy axe, opening and closing with ferocious might, continuously forcing Nie Kuan to retreat. Nie Kuan held his long sword. Although he was being pushed back step by step, his expression was calm. On the other side, Ning Qi and Ringan were also evenly matched. It was a protracted battle between them. It was difficult to determine the winner in a short period of time. Just as the Qingkou Hall and the Three Swords gang were fighting, two figures stood on the roof in the distance. One of them was a middle-aged man around 30 years old. He had a square appearance, wore brocade clothes, and had an extraordinary bearing. He didn't look like an ordinary person. Beside him stood a short and slightly stooped person. That person was covered in a black robe and his face couldn't be seen clearly. The middle-aged man said indifferently, "Old Mr. Liu, who do you think will win among the four?" "Gaga, that depends on who City Lord Chu wants to win." The old man's voice was abnormally hoarse and even had a hint of ear-piercing feeling, making people feel uncomfortable. The middle-aged man was the newly appointed City Lord of Shangyang City, Chu Xinran. As for the old man surnamed Liu, he was naturally Lung Shiqi in disguise. Back to 2 days ago. After leaving Bao Pingyi's mansion, Lung Shiqi planned to find a way to lure him out. However, Bao Pingyi had always been extremely cautious. If they wanted to lure him out, they would have to do something big for him. Coincidentally, he heard that the Three Swords Association seemed to have the intention to fight for Jingshu Street, so he thought of a plan. And the most important part of this plan was the City Lord of Shangyang City, Chu Xn Ran. On the surface, this matter didn't seem to have much to do with City Lord Chu, but in fact it wasn't. Mao Kai's information also mentioned that this Jinshu Street was one of the few bustling streets in the City Lord's mansion. How could Chu Xen have the thought of giving up so easily? Leng Shiqi vaguely felt that there was more to this than met the eye. For example, the news that Chinko Hall obtained was purposely released by the Three Swords Association. Then, could the news that the Three Swords Association obtained be purposely released by the City Lord's mansion? At that time, the more Leng Shiqi thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. However, Leng Shiqi didn't understand what City Lord Chu wanted to do. However, he knew one thing, and that was that Chu Xen would definitely make a move against these two gangs. Of course, he couldn't destroy these two gangs all at once, but he could weaken their power to gain a foothold. If that's the case, I might as well help you, Leng Shiqi thought to himself. Thus he disguised himself. Because he was still young and not very tall, he could only disguise himself as an old man. He smeared paint on his arms and neck, and used a voice-changing technique to imitate an old man's voice. Then he snuck into the City Lord's mansion. In the City Lord's mansion, there were only a few sleepy city guards standing guard. In terms of defense, it was much worse than the Three Swords Association. On the other hand, Chu Xen was still burning the midnight oil, dealing with various matters. Suddenly, the lights on the walls and the desk in the room flickered, as if they would go out at any moment. Chu Xen's expression changed. He slowly put down his hand that was holding the brush and said without changing his expression, "Who are you? I would like to meet you." The short old man that Leng Shiqi disguised as walked out from behind the curtain and said with a sharp voice, "Hee, City Lord Chu, you flatter me. I'm just a lonely ghost, I don't deserve to be called an expert." Chu Xen saw that someone had entered his room without him noticing. He couldn't help but be shocked, but his face remained calm. "Excuse me for not going out to meet you. May I know Senior's name?" "This old man's surname is Lu. So it's Senior Lu." Leng Shiqi didn't want to talk too much with Chu Xen because he had experienced too little in this world. Now that he was disguised as an old man, he was afraid that the more he said, the more mistakes he would make. Thus, he directly said, "This old man has disturbed City Lord Chu this time because of Jinshu Street." When Chu Xen heard the words Jinshu Street, a glint of light flashed across his eyes. But before he could speak, Leng Shiqi continued. "City Lord Chu doesn't need to say more. Now the City Lord's mansion in Shangyang City is being suppressed by two gangs. If it were me, I wouldn't be willing to accept this. Jinshu Street is indeed a piece of fat meat that causes two tigers to fight. But this piece of fat meat is not enough to hurt the two tigers. So this old man can help City Lord and let these two tigers really fight to the death. At that time, City Lord Chu can sit back and reap the benefits." Chu Xen heard this and put his hands behind his back. On the surface he still looked calm, but his fingers kept shaking. It could be seen that his heart was not so calm. He said in a deep voice, "Then what does Senior Lu want?" Leng Shiqi replied, "I want the heads of the 4 spiritual guards." "For spiritual guards?" Chu Xen's eyes flashed with doubt. "Yes, this old man and the 4 spiritual guards have an endless hatred, but they have been hiding in the mansion with Bao Pingyi and can't make a move. So, Senior Lu wants to use the matter of Jinshu Street to lure them out." "Yes. It's not that I look down on Senior, but the 4 spiritual guards are all spirit cultivators in the middle stage of the spirit transformation realm, and it is said that they are also good at joint attacks, comparable to the peak of the spirit transformation realm. Senior, I'm afraid." Chu Xen's words came to an abrupt end because a dagger was already at his throat. At this time, there was no trace of Leng Shiqi in front of his eyes. "City Lord Chu doesn't need to worry about this kind of thing." Leng Shiqi's voice came from behind Chu Xen. Chu Xen's heart had already been set off a monstrous wave. As the City Lord, he was at least at the spirit transformation realm, but he couldn't even catch a glimpse of the other party's figure. He said with difficulty, "Senior Lu is really powerful." When Leng Shiqi heard Chu Xen call him Senior instead of Senior, he knew that this matter was settled. Next, the two discussed some specific plans and Leng Shiqi left. In the next 2 days, under Chu Xen's urging, the conflict between the Chinko Hall and the Three Blades gang in Jinshu Street became more and more intense, and tonight's matter happened. Chapter 141. Leng Shiqi and Chu Xinran stood on the roof and watched the battle not far away. At this moment, Jinshu Street was covered in blood. The battle between Chinko Hall and the Three Swords Gang had reached a climax. Lung Shiqi used a voice-changing technique to change his voice. City Lord Chu still hasn't made a decision? Chu Xinran's eyes were locked on Nie Kuan. He knew that Nie Kuan was not only powerful but also very scheming. He could be said to be Bao Pingyi's right-hand man. If he could kill him, the Three Swords Gang would suffer a loss. Chu Xinran opened his mouth and said, Nie Kuan. Lung Shiqi did not answer. Instead, a gray cloud came out of his body. When the gray cloud dissipated, he had disappeared. Seeing this scene, Chu Xinran's eyes flashed with traces of fear. On the other side of the battle, Nie Kuan and Tianhu were fighting the fiercest. Or it could be said that Tianhu was even fiercer. He waved his giant axe and cut down countless stalls. Everywhere he went was a mess. From the scene he did suppress Nie Kuan, but in reality, Nie Kuan was not injured. Instead, Tianhu's aura was a bit chaotic. Astute people could see that Nie Kuan was luring Tianhu to consume large amounts of spirit power. When Tianhu's spirit power ran out, it would be his death. The other leader of Chinko Hall, Rengan, had seen through it. He wanted to remind Tianhu, but unfortunately, Nie Kuan had already lured Tianhu away. Rengan had to concentrate on dealing with Ningqi, so he was powerless to do anything. Bang! Tianhu's heavy axe, which was flickering with dense spiritual light, smashed the roadside stall into pieces. However, it missed once again. When he used his spirit power to attack Nie Kuan again, he was shocked to find that he could not use his spirit power for a while. Only then did he notice that more than half of his spirit power had been consumed. Nie Kuan had a victorious smile on his face. The long sword in his hand was like a poisonous snake hiding in the dark, waiting for the opportunity to come. Now was the opportunity. Nie Kuan's long sword shook and instantly stabbed out several times. Each sword was aimed at Tianhu's vital points. Tianhu was shocked and thought that he had been careless this time. Just as Nie Kuan's sword was about to pierce Tianhu, a short figure suddenly appeared behind him, and a sharp dagger pierced his heart from the back. Nie Kuan's body suddenly trembled and he quickly turned around. His sword suddenly became steady and he narrowly blocked the dagger. Lung Shiqi did not expect Nie Kuan's reaction to be so fast. Nie Kuan's body was like a floating in the air. At this time, Nie Kuan's heart was already in his throat. He could not help but feel a bit of fear because he could not keep up with his opponent's speed. Zheng. Zheng's swords drew in his left, two purple swords in the air under the two gale slashes. Nie Kuan's sword was broken and he died. Zheng's, in Zin's. Just. Nie Kuan's cultivation was on par with Lung Shiqi's, but there was a huge difference in theirs. In addition, he had already used up a lot of his. He was ambushed by Lung Shiqi and died. At this moment, Tianhu's two tiger eyes were wide open. He still couldn't believe his own eyes. Nie Kuan, who almost killed him, died just like that? He was almost killed in an instant. He was a spirit cultivator at the middle stage of the spirit transformation realm. Could that person be an expert at the fourth realm of the sky realm? However, Lung Shiqi, who had killed Nie Kuan, said to him, "The Hall Master sent me to help you. Go and support Ringan." The Hall Master sent you? How come I don't know? Although Tianhu had a bad temper, he was not stupid. The person in front of him was too strange, and he could not help but be suspicious. How can you understand the Hall Master's thoughts? Do you know how much credit it is to kill Nie Kuan and Ningqi? Hurry up and go. Lung Shiqi pretended to be angry and shouted. All right. When Tianhu heard the word credit, he immediately threw away the doubts in his heart and turned to kill Ningqi. Lung Shiqi looked left and right. The place where they were fighting was far away from the battlefield, so there weren't many people who would notice this place. Fortunately, Tianhu had brought Nie Kuan here. Otherwise he would have to spend more effort. Then he once again hid in the darkness and disappeared. After that, the news of the death of the Three Blades Gang's fourth master, Nie Kuan, spread out at a strange speed. It reached the ears of the leaders of the Three Blades Gang on the surrounding streets, and also reached Bao Pingyi's ears. Bao Pingyi smashed the teacup in his hand. He suppressed the anger in his heart and asked in a deep voice, "Is the news true?" The person who delivered the news nodded and said, "It's absolutely true. Right now there's only 7th Master in Jianghu Street. I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on for long. They're all trash. Go quickly, get the nearby 3rd brother, 5th brother, and 6th brother to bring reinforcements. Tonight I want to see Tianhu and Ringan's heads." Yes. A moment later, a large number of Three Blades Gang's reinforcements arrived at Jianghu Street. Ringan and Tianhu were caught unprepared. Facing the 4 leaders of the Three Blades gang, they could only bitterly defend, and the injuries on their bodies became more and more serious. Bah, the bastards of the Three Blades gang don't abide by the rules, right? Go call for reinforcements, Tianhu shouted. Not long after, hundreds of Jinko Hall members rushed over. Both sides were fighting with their blood rushing to their heads, and no longer had any scruples. The more intense the fight, the more people died. The strange thing was, in some corners, there would always be people who died inexplicably. Both groups of people were crazily killing with red eyes. In Bao Pingyi's residence, there was an endless stream of people delivering news. President Jinko Hall's reinforcements have also arrived. They have more people than us. Good news. 7th Master has beheaded Jinko Hall's leader, Tianhu. Oh no, 7th Master is gone. You must avenge 7th Master, President. However, Bao Pingyi didn't say anything. Only the armrest under his hand had a few cracks from the tremors. He thought to himself, could it be that Jinko Hall wants to fight with me? Just for a small Jinshu Street? No, Go Huarong has been in charge of Jinko Hall for more than 10 years and has always been conservative. He won't be so impulsive. Something is strange. Just as he was thinking, another person rushed in from outside. He ran in with snot and tears and shouted in grief and indignation, President, the 3rd Lord and the 5th Lord are both dead gone. What? Bao Pingyi instantly crushed the armrest of the chair into powder. How is it possible? Jinko Hall's Hall Master, Go Huarong, has personally taken action. Go Huarong has taken action? Bao Pingyi doubted the reliability of the news at first. According to his understanding of Go Huarong, he wouldn't do such a thing. In this way they would really have to fight to the death. Although he knew that this day would come, he never thought it would come so soon. Vaguely he felt that there must be something fishy. At this time he was still hesitating whether to go out and fight. At this time one of the 4 spirit guards behind him said, with us 4 brothers here, there is no need for President Bao to worry. We can take advantage of this opportunity to help you occupy Shangyang City. It will be more convenient for you in the future. After Bao Pingyi heard this, he finally made up his mind. His aura of the 8th layer of the spirit transformation realm spread out and led everyone to Jinshu Street. Chapter 142. On the other side, Leng Shiqi, who was hiding near Jinshu Street, was surprised to see the Hall Master of Jinko Hall, Go Huarong, suddenly appear. However, he didn't have time to think about it and left the place because he knew that Bao Pingyi would definitely come out. In the past 2 days, Leng Shiqi had secretly walked around the entire Shangyang City. The system map had clearly shown the terrain of Shangyang City. Therefore, Leng Shiqi hurriedly rushed to the Bao residence, which was the only way to get to Jinshu Street. However, he didn't know that Chu Xinran, who was watching all of this from afar, sneered softly. Bao Pingyi and the 4 spiritual guards walked through the dark street, feeling a little uneasy in his heart. He felt that something was not quite right, but he had no choice but to come out. He could not just stand by and watch the people of Jinko Hall slaughter his gang members. Suddenly, his years of cautiousness made him extremely sensitive to danger. At this moment he was keenly aware of a sense of crisis. Bao Pingyi's body suddenly stopped, his feet drawing 2 marks on the ground. Then he pulled out the 2 long swords at his waist and looked around vigilantly. The 4 spiritual guards instantly protected Bao Pingyi from all sides. One of them asked, President Bao, what did you find? No, I just feel some danger. Bao Pingyi's eyes swept around and said carefully. The 4 spiritual guards' faces sank. President Bao is too sensitive. Let's go to Jinshu Street. Moreover, with us 4 brothers here, we can ensure President Bao's safety. This? Bao Pingyi hesitated. The feeling of danger was still there. It was like a fierce beast hiding in the grass staring at its prey, and he was the prey. As long as there was a slight flaw, he would be buried in the tiger's mouth. This feeling made him very uncomfortable. However, the 4 spiritual guards were not Bao Pingyi's subordinates, but disciples of Heavenly Cloud Tower. He didn't have the qualifications to order them. However, he thought about it again. With these 4 guards from the Spirit Cultivator sect, unless an expert of the 4 realms of heaven appeared, he really had nothing to be afraid of. If a spirit cultivator of the 4 realms of heaven came to kill him, he would accept it. Thinking of this, Bao Pingyi nodded and continued to rush towards Jinshu Street. However, he didn't put down the long saber in his hand. Patter. However, they had only taken a few steps when a soft sound suddenly came from the dark corner of the street. "Who is it?" Bao Pingyi stopped again and immediately assumed a stance. His two blades emitted traces of spiritual light as he shouted towards that direction. The four spiritual guards also took it seriously this time, and held their respective sword hilts one after another. Unexpectedly, a few cat meows came from the darkness. It was actually a cat. Bao Pingyi heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. At this time, the four spiritual guards were a little unhappy. They felt as if they had been played. Although they belonged to a third-rate sect, they were still disciples of true spirit cultivators. They didn't think much of a small gang like the Three Swords gang, so they were very unhappy with the fact that they had to protect Bao Pingyi. In their eyes, Bao Pingyi was just a clown. Now this clown's antics were even more annoying. Bao Pingyi was also a little embarrassed. However, he couldn't say anything and could only move forward. After a short while, the road was smooth and there were no more accidents. They could already faintly hear the sounds of fighting coming from Jianghu Street. Their footsteps couldn't help but quicken. At this time, a black shadow suddenly appeared from the side of the street. Bao Pingyi's two blades suddenly swung out. Two thin blade lights flashed past and pierced the black shadow. "Cough, President." "President?" That person's eyes widened as he looked at Bao Pingyi in disbelief. However, the vitality in his eyes immediately dissipated. Bao Pingyi pushed the person away and discovered that this person was actually a small leader of the Three Swords gang. Looking at his injured appearance, he should have just retreated from the battlefield. He actually killed his own people? At this time, Bao Pingyi also felt that he was a little too sensitive. As the saying goes, the first drum of energy, the second will be weak and the third will be exhausted. Now, the vigilance in his heart was slowly decreasing. At the moment when his vigilance was at its weakest, a purple crescent blade light suddenly bloomed under the body of the small leader who had fallen to the ground. The blade light whistled out as if it was going to cut through the night. It slashed towards Bao Pingyi with an astonishingly sharp intent. Bao Pingyi was aghast. He used the shortest time to throw out a wooden lump and quickly retreated. At the same time he crushed his waist token. The wooden lump kept making ka-ka sounds in mid-air. It was like a mechanism that rapidly changed and gradually formed the shape of a shield. Unfortunately, this shield had not been completely formed yet and was instantly cut in half by the purple crescent blade light. The purple crescent blade light's momentum did not decrease. At this time, a blue brilliance suddenly flashed in front of Bao Pingyi and turned into a water curtain. Puff! The blade light slashed onto the water curtain and instantly sank into it. It was almost directly cutting through the water curtain. However, the water curtain had extremely strong tenacity and forcibly blocked the blade light. However, the water curtain was also rapidly fading. After holding on for 2 breaths, it finally turned into a bubble. However, the purple crescent blade light had also consumed a lot of spiritual power and shrunk by more than half. However, it still slashed towards Bao Pingyi like a shadow. Bao Pingyi growled and waved his 2 blades again and again, slashing out dozens of blade lights. Unfortunately, when those blade lights touched the purple crescent blade light, they were easily cut into pieces. However, because of this, the purple crescent blade light shrunk again. In the end, it only had less than 10% of its power left. When it slashed Bao Pingyi, it produced a crisp, dang sound. Bao Pingyi's clothes were torn, but his body was unharmed. This was because he was wearing a golden soft armor underneath. The final blade light only left a shallow blade mark on the soft armor. Bao Pingyi's whole body was covered in a layer of cold sweat. His heart was also in his throat. He had calculated everything and taken precautions, but he never thought that someone would use such a strange method to assassinate him. What was even more terrifying was that the blade light just now was too terrifying. It had consecutively destroyed 2 of his life-saving trump cards and even exposed a 3rd one. What kind of blade technique is that? It's so terrifying. Is it really a spiritual pulse realm expert who came to kill me? Bao Pingyi was horrified. He was really scared by that blade. Leng Shiqi, who attacked, did not expect that Bao Pingyi would have so many life-saving trump cards. He had thought that the half-moon rapid light slash would at least be able to injure Bao Pingyi, but in the end, Bao Pingyi was still intact. He knew that things were troublesome, because the 4 spiritual guards had attacked. It took a long time to describe, but in fact, from Leng Shiqi's half-moon rapid light slash to Bao Pingyi revealing the golden soft armor, it all happened in a flash. The 4 spiritual guards did not have time to react, and all of this had already happened. At this time, the 4 of them had an unusually rich expression on their faces. There was surprise, shock, shame, and even a trace of fear. At the same time, they all had the same thought: if the target of that blade light was me, would I be able to survive? But in the next moment they were all furious. The mission given to them by the sect was to protect Bao Pengyi, but he had almost been killed. If this matter was ruined, they would not be able to escape the blame. That assassin had to die. The 4 spiritual guards pulled out their spirit swords at the same time. After releasing their mid-stage spirit transformation realm auras, they faintly felt like they were one. Then the 4 swords stabbed out. At the same time, Bao Pengyi turned around and fled. Chapter 143. Leng Shiqi saw that he was about to be stopped by the 4 spirit guards, and Bao Pengyi was running in the opposite direction. His speed was not slow and he had a movement technique, so he felt a bit anxious. It has to be said that there were more than 100 guards from the Bao mansion in the direction Bao Pengyi was running. Bao Pengyi and the 4 spirit guards were faster, so they were one step ahead. If Bao Pengyi met up with the guards, he would have no chance at all. I have to kill him before the guards arrive. However, at this moment, the swords of the 4 spirit guards fell. 4 steady sword moves were thrust out, carrying with them a scorching aura. The spiritual power in Leng Shiqi's body circulated rapidly, and a group of cold air suddenly gushed out. Then the cold air spread out and instantly engulfed the 4 spiritual guards. In the blink of an eye, their bodies were covered with a thin layer of ice crystals. A spirit cultivator? The 4 spirit guards were secretly shocked. Although this layer of ice was not very strong and they only needed 2 or 3 breaths to break out, they realized that their opponent was not simple. Leng Shiqi took this opportunity to rush out. He stepped on the black fog and his body floated in the wind. He looked slow, but he was actually as fast as the wind as he caught up to Bao Pengyi. Bao Pengyi felt the movement behind him. He turned around and saw Leng Shiqi chasing after him with a saber in his hand. Moreover, the distance between them was getting closer and closer. Bao Pengyi was shocked and his face turned ashen. There was a flash of light in his eyes. Instead of running away and being caught, it was better to fight head-on. As long as he could delay until the 4 spirit guards and the other guards arrived, he would be safe. He might even be able to kill this assassin. At this moment, Bao Pengyi suddenly turned around and his powerful aura of the 8th layer of the spirit transformation realm surged. He crossed his blades and the blades shined brightly. Leng Shiqi saw that Bao Pengyi was attacking instead of running and was very happy. He thought, there is no door to hell, yet you still dare to charge in. Leng Shiqi raised his saber to meet the attack. When the 2 of them got closer, Leng Shiqi was just about to use his half-moon swift slash. However, Bao Pengyi unexpectedly let go of the saber in his right hand. The next moment, Bao Pengyi pulled out a short knife from somewhere and pointed it at Leng Shiqi's vital point from an extremely strange angle. The 3rd saber. In fact, many people had always had a question. That was, Bao Pengyi was clearly best at dual blades, but the faction he had single-handedly created was called the 3 Blades Guild? Then why wasn't it called the Twin Sabers Association? At this moment, Leng Shiqi finally understood. Bao Pengyi had been hiding his 3rd weapon all this time. Not only was the blade fast, but the angle was also ruthless. The entire blade also flashed with a faint green light. Obviously, it had been dipped in poison. Leng Shiqi used the floating spirit steps to dodge. At the same time, he used the curved blade to block and slightly avoided the tricky attack. Bao Pengyi turned his body and slashed with the long and short sabers in his hands. At the same time, the other long saber was clamped by his neck. He twisted his head and the last long saber also came stabbing over. He was actually using 3 sabers with 2 hands. It was amazing. Moreover, his attack rhythm was very fast. His wrist, elbow, shoulder. Even every joint in his body could be used to operate the 3rd saber. Leng Shiqi had never fought with such an opponent before. He did not have any similar battle experience. Furthermore, Bao Pengyi's cultivation was far higher than his. He was actually at a disadvantage. Leng Shiqi also admitted that he had underestimated Bao Pengyi. The outside world was different from the Blood Fog Island. On the Blood Fog Island, no one had much time to study spirit techniques, so he could do whatever he wanted with his perfect spirit techniques. But in this great world, a spirit cultivator like Bao Pengyi who had lived for decades did not have much hope of breaking through to the 4th realm of the Sky Realm. He had a lot of time to hone his spirit techniques. His spirit energy foundation might not be as pure as Leng Shiqi's, but his decades of battle experience was far from what Leng Shiqi could compare to. What was worse was that at this time, the 4 spirit guards also broke out of the ice and ran over. Leng Shiqi knew that he could not delay any longer. In the face of Bao Pingyi's rain-like attacks, Leng Shiqi opened his mouth and let out a roar that resounded through the night sky. This sudden roar caused Bao Pingyi's ears to buzz, and his attacks instantly slowed down. Leng Shiqi hurriedly retreated a few steps. His left palm shone with a faint starlight. Then, with a push of his palm, a turbulent cold air sprayed towards Bao Pingyi. The dense cold air froze Bao Pingyi in the blink of an eye, as well as the 4 spirit guards who had just rushed over behind him. Spirit attack, path of ice. The ice that sealed Bao Pingyi quickly cracked. Leng Shiqi knew that he could not trap him for long. His left hand reached to his waist and pulled out another scimitar. Then Leng Shiqi's spirit energy flowed rapidly, crazily pouring into the 2 scimitars. A few purple veins appeared on the blade, and 2 extremely bright saber lights shone. In the next moment, 2 stunning purple crescent blade lights whizzed out from the blade, splitting the sky in a forked shape and swallowing Bao Pingyi. Bao Pingyi was aghast and could only use his weapon to block in front of him. Only a few ka-ka sounds were heard. The 2 purple blade lights instantly shattered Bao Pingyi's weapon and landed on his golden silk soft armor. The soft armor was made of an unknown material. It was not only hard but also flexible. It blocked the blade lights, causing Bao Pingyi's body to fly backwards. But after a few breaths, the golden silk soft armor finally broke. Bao Pingyi's mouth was wide open in horror. He had just seen the 4 spirit guards frozen and knew that the person in front of him was also a spirit master. But he never thought that Leng Shiqi could almost instantaneously release such a large area of effect spell. He was shocked, he was angry, he was unwilling. He had been careful for decades, but in the end he was still going to die under the assassination of others. The cards he had painstakingly accumulated for decades could not stop the footsteps of the god of death. Just when he thought that he was going to die, 4 scorching sword chi suddenly appeared and consumed half of the blade light spirit energy. Immediately, 4 swords appeared in front of Bao Pingyi at the same time to help him block the 2 purple moon blade lights. The blade lights and the swords collided, making a clanging sound and creating a dazzling spark. In the end, the blade lights were exhausted, but the 4 swords were also cut open. The 4 spirit guards had arrived at the most critical moment. Bao Pingyi had 1 foot in the door of death, but he was pulled back. He had escaped death and was gasping for breath. The 4 spirit guards protected Bao Pingyi behind them, and one by one, they glared at Leng Shiqi. Tonight's battle could be said to be extremely aggrieved because so far, they had not really fought with the assassin. But Bao Pingyi, who they wanted to protect, had almost died. Die. The 4 spirit guards shouted in unison and then rushed together. Leng Shiqi saw that Bao Pingyi had 2 deep blood marks in front of him. He was seriously injured, but it was not fatal. Facing the 4 spirit guards, Leng Shiqi raised his hand and shot out a dagger. The 4 spirit guards were just about to dodge, but they were puzzled again. It was because the dagger shot by Leng Shiqi was not aimed at them, nor at Bao Pingyi behind them, but flew over their heads at an oblique angle. Did he miss? They could not understand, but they did not need to understand. At this time, the 4 spirit guards just wanted to kill this person. So, the dagger continued to shoot. Just when the dagger was about to hit Bao Pingyi's head, a stone pillar as thick as his waist strangely appeared under him and lifted him into the air. Puchi, the dagger hit Bao Pingyi's throat. Chapter 144. Leng Shiqi had used such a strange method to kill Bao Pingyi, causing the 4 spiritual guards to be stunned. Bao Pingyi's death meant that their mission had failed. The 4 spiritual guards originally thought that this was just a very simple mission. In a small Shangyang city that did not even have a 4th realm of sky human, who could kill Bao Pingyi who was under their heavy protection. But Bao Pingyi was really dead. His death was inexplicable and his death was very strange. One could imagine that when they returned to the Heavenly Cloud Tower, they would inevitably face severe punishment from the sect. What made the 4 spiritual guards feel even more humiliated was that from the beginning to the end, they seemed to have been played by the assassin. As spirit cultivator sects, they simply could not bear it. So they immediately rushed over angrily. 4 streams of sword chi appeared at the same time, wishing that they could tear Leng Shiqi into pieces. Leng Shiqi was relieved after killing Bao Pingyi, but according to the rules of the Blood Robe Pavilion, he had to bring back the assassination target's head before he could hand over the mission. At this time, when he saw the 4 spiritual guards rushing over, his eyes revealed a hint of annoyance. He had never fought with the 4 spiritual guards. Firstly, he was afraid that they would stop him from killing Bao Pingyi. Secondly, he did not want to be involved with the heavenly cloud tower. So he raised his hand and 4 earth walls suddenly rose from the ground. The 4 spiritual guards rushed over and crashed into the earth walls. The earth walls did not stop them for long, only stopping them for a moment. However, it was during this pause that Leng Shiqi stepped on the black fog and rushed to Bao Pingyi's side. Then he held the dagger and took Bao Pingyi's head. At this moment, Leng Shiqi's mission was finally completed. Although there were some twists and turns in the process, his goal was achieved. At this time, more than 100 figures rushed over. They were the guards that Bao Pingyi had bribed. When they arrived, the first thing they saw was Bao Pingyi's headless body. They all opened their mouths wide in surprise, and their hearts were set off huge waves. Their president, Bao Pingyi, who was at the 8th level of the spirit transformation realm, was actually dead. He died under the protection of the 4 spiritual guards? Could it be that a spirit cultivator of the 4 realms of heaven had made a move? At this time, some people even began to wonder if it was the 4 spiritual guards who had killed their president. One of the 4 spiritual guards pointed at Leng Shiqi and shouted, "This is the person who killed your president, Bao Pingyi." Hearing this, many of the sect members were furious when they saw Leng Shiqi. They all raised their weapons and pressed forward. Leng Shiqi sneered in his heart. Just as he was about to leave, he heard neat footsteps coming from both ends of the street. He paused and turned his head to look. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of spirit cultivators wearing silver light armor and holding standard weapons blocked the Leng Shiqi, the 4 spiritual guards, and more than 100 Three Blades gang members. There were even dozens of archers with arrows knocked on their bowstrings, ready to shoot at any time. It's the city guards. Why are the city guards here? Could this be Chu Xinran's doing? What should we do now? The people of the Three Blades gang were suddenly in a state of panic. At this time, a middle-aged man walked out from the group of city guards. He was the city lord of Shangyang City, Chu Xinran. Chu Xinran's gaze first looked at the sullen 4 spiritual guards, then turned to Leng Shiqi and finally landed on Bao Pingyi's head. He revealed a meaningful smile and said, "Mr. Liu, didn't you say you wanted to deal with the 4 spiritual guards? Why did you kill Bao Pingyi?" When Leng Shiqi saw Chu Xinran appear with the city guards, he knew that he had been tricked. His eyes flashed with a cold light and he said in a hoarse voice, "What do you want to do, Mr. Chu?" Chu Xinran casually straightened his sleeves and said cheerfully, "Old Mr. Liu has done me a great favor. I'm truly grateful to you. Since Mr. Liu has a grudge with the 4 spiritual guards, I will help you get rid of them." Chu Xinran wants to kill the 4 spiritual guards? A trace of doubt flashed through Leng Shiqi's heart. He quickly skipped through many thoughts in his mind. Combined with the sudden appearance of Qingko Hall's Hall Master Go Huarong in Jinshe Street, he faintly connected everything together. He was secretly shocked. So all of this has been under Chu Xinran's control all along. He must have secretly joined forces with Go Huarong to find an opportunity to severely damage or even destroy the Three Blades gang. Jinshe Street was a bait, and it just so happened that my appearance added fuel to the fire. What a good Chu Xinran. Thinking of this, Leng Shiqi couldn't help but secretly admire Chu Xinran. This Chu Xinran had quickly gathered the city guards and joined forces with Qingko Hall when he first arrived. This method was really extraordinary. But all of this has nothing to do with me, Leng Shiqi thought to himself. Now that he had completed his mission, he had no intention of participating in the power struggle in Shangyang City, so he said, "Since City Lord Chu has the heart, please do as you wish. This old man has other matters to attend to, so I won't disturb you." With that, Leng Shiqi hid in the dark alley behind him and disappeared. Chu Xinran didn't stop him. He turned his head and shouted to the Three Blades gang. The Three Blades gang has been bullying the people and dominating the city for many years, causing Shangyang City to be filled with complaints. As the city lord, I naturally have to punish them. However, since the main culprit, Bao Pingyi, is dead, you can leave as long as you promise not to cause trouble in the future. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless. When Chu Xinran said these words, many of the gang members were moved. Most of these people were actually hired by Bao Pingyi with money. They only had this relationship of interest between them. When they saw that only Leng Shiqi had cut off their source of income, they had dared to act. But now they didn't have the courage to face hundreds of city guards. It was true that they wanted money, but they wanted their lives even more. Immediately, 80% of the gang members fled in all directions, leaving only 20 or 30 people with sullen faces and motionless faces. These people were the ones who had followed Bao Pingyi to build the foundation of the Three Blades gang. They were the ones who were truly loyal to Baopingyi. At this moment, even though they knew that they would die, they still stayed. Chu Xinran sighed with emotion. Alas, there are still people who are so loyal to a selfish person like Baopingyi. Alas, what a pity. Shoot the arrows. Wait. Just after Chu Xinran gave the order, the 4 spiritual guards suddenly shouted. City Lord Chu, you should know who we are. Since Baopingyi is dead, we have nothing to do with the Three Blades gang. We won't interfere in your fight. Goodbye. Oh? Who allowed you to leave? Chu Xinran said with a sinister smile. What? Chu Xinran, do you know who we are? We are the disciples of the Heavenly Cloud Pavilion. How dare you touch us? Chu Xinran sneered. Humph, when you are all dead, who will know it was me? Shoot the arrows. So, dozens of arrows fell like a dense rain. The remaining members of the Three Blades gang were suddenly drowned in the arrows, and miserable screams rang out. The 4 spiritual guards could only bitterly resist. Even though they were in the spirit transformation realm, the arrows were not ordinary arrows. The people who shot the arrows were all spirit cultivators, so they were not easy to block. In the blink of an eye, all of them were injured. Chu Xinran waved his hand and hundreds of city guards slowly closed in. The 4 spiritual guards' faces were ashen. Leng Shiqi, who was hiding in the dark, quietly left. Chapter 145. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. The sounds of fighting could be heard throughout Shangyang City. Ordinary people could only hide in their houses and pray for a sense of security. They could only silently wait for the changes in Shangyang City. After Leng Shiqi left, he did not directly return to Shadewind Ridge. Instead, he went to Jinshe Street to take a look. The situation here was already one-sided. In fact, at the beginning, both sides had lost a team leader, so they could be considered to be evenly matched. However, the hall master of Qingkou Hall, Go Huarong, personally made a move. None of the leaders of the Three Swords gang could stop him and suffered heavy casualties. However, they did not scatter in all directions. They were still trying their best to hold on because they still had confidence and hope in their hearts. That confidence and hope came from Baopingyi and the 4 spiritual guards. As long as Baopingyi arrived, they would be able to stabilize the situation. As long as the 4 spiritual guards arrived, they would be able to turn defense into offense. Unfortunately, they did not know that Baopingyi was already dead and the 4 spiritual guards were not far from death. Leng Shiqi shook his head slightly. He had already predicted the outcome of the Three Swords gang. Then he turned around and ran towards a certain place. That was Bao Mansion. Not long after, Leng Shiqi quietly sneaked into the mansion. Now there were only 20 to 30 guards and some servants in Bao Mansion. Leng Shiqi was completely unstoppable. Byakugan, activate. He activated Byakugan and the entire Bao Mansion was within his field of vision. The target he was looking for was Baopingyi's private vault. Baopingyi was the leader of the Three Swords gang and had taken root in Shangyang City for more than 10 years. During this time he had collected countless precious resources. Moreover, he was a cautious person. It was impossible for him to give these resources to others for safekeeping. It was also impossible for him to build a vault in his mansion. Therefore, it was very likely that he had secretly built a secret chamber. This was the secret room that Leng Shiqi was looking for. There really is one. With the help of Byakugan's X-ray vision and the system map, Leng Shiqi quickly discovered that there was indeed a secret chamber 30 feet underground. Moreover, he could clearly see that there were more than 10 hidden mechanisms all over the secret chamber. Leng Shiqi immediately used Gaia's hand to drill into the ground, sneaking directly into the secret room and quickly destroying all the mechanisms. Only then did he begin to carefully observe the secret room. The secret chamber wasn't very big, only about 20 feet in radius. There were many large boxes on the ground, and there were some wooden shelves on the surrounding walls. There were also some things displayed on the shelves, but there weren't many of them. Leng Shiqi first opened the big boxes. Most of the things inside were gold, silver, and other treasures. He didn't care for these things. After all, to a spirit cultivator, spirit stones were the real currency. Of course, he still packed them all up. In the last few boxes there were some spirit tools. There were first and second tier spirit tools, but unfortunately, there were no third tier spirit tools. Leng Shiqi put away a 3-part spear. This spear could be divided into 3 parts, and there was a chain in the middle, making it more flexible to use. As for the rest of the spiritual equipment, he sold them all to the system for more than 300 system coins. After that, Leng Shiqi began to look at the things on the wooden shelf. Basically, there were some rare herbs on the shelf. They were mainly materials for refining pills. These resources were useless to Leng Shiqi, so he threw them all to the system. Now he had 641 system coins. It was enough for 6 intermediate lottery draws. It seemed like the harvest was not bad, but Leng Shiqi's eyebrows were tightly knitted. Because he had searched the entire secret chamber, but he couldn't find a single spirit stone, pill, cultivation technique, or spirit skill. These were the most important cultivation resources, but there was none. Impossible. Could it be that there are other secret chambers in the Bao residence? Leng Shiqi whispered to himself, but he couldn't find any other secret chambers even after using supercilious eyes and the system map. In the end, he could only sigh and leave the secret chamber. On the other side, there was only one person left in the 4 spirit guards. There weren't many injuries on this person's body, but his face was already deathly pale. Because there were several swords on his neck, if he dared to move, his head would be separated from his body. At this time, Chu Xen Ran walked in front of him and whispered, "Others call you the 4 spirit guards, this Chu still doesn't know your name." "Jianghu," he carefully said. Chu Xen Ran's face came in front of his face and asked, "So it's Brother Ji, do you think this Chu will kill you?" Jianghu suddenly felt a pressure on his heart. He silently swallowed his saliva and said, "Jianghu is willing to listen to City Lord Chu's orders. It's good to talk to smart people. Then tell me who killed the other 3-4 spirit guards." Jianghu's eyes spun as he thought for a bit and said, It's that assassin. He came to kill Bao Pingyi, but we couldn't protect Bao Pingyi and suffered heavy casualties." Chu Xen Ran clapped his hands and said, "Very good. Then do you know the assassin's name?" "Well, his surname seems to be Lu." Before Jianghu could finish, Chu Xen Ran interrupted him. "No, his surname is not Lu but Leng. He's a fugitive named Leng Shiqi." "How do you know so clearly? Could it be that you?" Jianghu suddenly covered his mouth, his eyes filled with fear. He was afraid of being killed. Chu Xen Ran sneered and said, "You should go back to Heavenly Cloud Tower later. You should know what to say and what not to say, right?" I know, Jianghu hurriedly said. "But this Chu can't believe you, so I can only ask Brother Ji to take this pill." Chu Xen Ran took out a dark green pill and said. Jianghu's eyes suddenly showed some desperation. "Brother Ji, are you not willing?" Jianghu trembled and said, "After I go back, I will report to the sect as Mayor Chu said, but if I suddenly die, the sect will doubt my words." "Don't worry, I'm not that stupid. You're more useful alive than dead. After a while, someone will contact you and give you the antidote." Chu Xen Ran said and put the pill in front of Yashitsugu's mouth. Jianghu knew that his life was in Chu Xen Ran's hands, and he also knew that from now on, he would become a chess piece in Chu Xen Ran's hands. But at this time, if he didn't take it, he would die. He had to close his eyes and swallow the pill. Chu Xen Ran smiled and waved his hand, "Let him go." The surrounding city guards withdrew their weapons, and Jianghu immediately sat on the ground, panting wildly and couldn't help coughing a few times. Chu Xen Ran didn't even look at him and led his men to Bao Mansion. Soon after, Chu Xen Ran rushed into Bao Mansion with the city guards and searched everywhere. Soon they found the secret room where Leng Shiqi had been. However, when he saw that it was empty, his face suddenly became gloomy. Chapter 146. The next morning. The residents and peddlers of Shangyang City pushed open their doors as usual to prepare for today's work. The 2 streets where the battle had taken place last night had already been washed clean. There was no trace of blood, but the air was still filled with the smell of blood. Leng Shiqi had returned to his original appearance. His wide black clothes covered half of his face as he walked on the street. He had not returned to the Shadowwind Ridge to hand in the mission because he still had something to do. That was to replenish his spirit skills. In the later stages of Blood Mist Island, for some reason, resources such as cultivation methods and spirit skills became fewer and fewer. Instead, there were more and more spirit stones and pills. And ever since Leng Shiqi left Blood Mist Island, he had only cultivated the floating spirit steps. In other words, Leng Shiqi had not expanded his spirit skills for a long time. Right now, his sword, saber, fist, and spear techniques had already fused into a corresponding powerful move, but the rest were still incomplete. Leng Shiqi planned to buy some palm techniques, leg techniques, and finger techniques in Shangyang City. On one hand, he could directly increase his combat strength, and on the other hand, he could use them to see if he could fuse them into a powerful spirit skill. He patted the 100 or so spirit stones in the bag at his waist and walked into the spirit cultivator commercial street. Most of the residents in each city were ordinary people. Although spirit cultivators and ordinary people lived in the same city, they were from two completely different worlds. Therefore, every city had streets specially prepared for spirit cultivators, known as the Spirit Cultivator Commercial Street. Only spirit cultivators could enter the Spirit Cultivator Commercial Street. Even if it was a shop worker, even if it was a handyman, he had to be a spirit cultivator. The scale of the Spirit Cultivator Commercial Street in different cities was also different. And in a small city like Shangyang City, there was only one street. When Leng Shiqi turned into the Spirit Cultivator Commercial Street, there were a few people standing guard on the street. When they saw him walking over, they wanted to stop him. Leng Shiqi did not stop walking or say a word. The spirit energy in his body moved and he emitted the aura of the spirit transformation realm. Those people immediately returned to their original positions obediently. Leng Shiqi walked straight into the Spirit Cultivator Commercial Street. It was still early and there were not many people on the street. He then walked into a shop. After a while he came out, but his expression didn't seem to be very good. Then he entered 4 shops in succession, all of which sold spiritual techniques. When he came out of the last shop, his expression was a little strange. It was a mixture of joy and bitterness. He muttered to himself, I didn't think spirit skills would be such a scarce resource in this world." It turned out that Leng Shiqi had visited 5 shops that sold spiritual techniques in a row, but he had gained very little. Most of the goods in the shop were materials and spirit tools, but there were very few cultivation methods and spirit techniques. Because cultivation methods and spirit techniques were basically in the hands of the various spirit cultivator sects, the ones that could be sold in the shops were all unintentionally leaked out. Even if there were, their ranks were not high. They were only at the 1st or 2nd level. He didn't even see a single 3rd level spiritual skill. Moreover, the price was ridiculously high. Even an ordinary level 2 spiritual skill would cost around 100 spirit stones. Leng Shiqi felt a little weak in his heart. He originally thought that his spirit stones weren't small, but it turned out that it was only enough to buy a level 2 spiritual skill. He felt that the price was too high, so much so that he began to miss the days on Blood Mist Island. However, he finally realized the depth of the Blood Robe Pavilion's foundation. He still remembered that there were thousands of low-level spiritual skills on display on the 1st floor of the Blood Book Hall. Moreover, as long as he was promoted to Black-Clothed Assassin, he would be able to obtain a level 3 spiritual skill for free. This kind of treatment was not something that an ordinary sect could give. Later, Leng Shiqi had an idea. He found another way and requested to see the spiritual skills. 4 of the 5 shops agreed. Unfortunately, 2 of them only took out the real spiritual skills, so he used his unlimited skill points to secretly learn 2 level 2 spiritual skills. They were Forest Front Finger and Poison Fire Palm. At the time, Leng Shiqi rejected them because they were too difficult to cultivate. The shop owners didn't have any complaints because these 2 spiritual skills were very difficult to cultivate. For example, if one mastered Forest Front Finger, one finger could turn into a dense forest of finger shadows. However, to cultivate it, one had to polish one finger for many years, which took a very long time. As for the other Poison Fire Palm, it didn't take too long to cultivate, but one had to soak one's hands in poison every day. Moreover, it had to be cultivated in an extremely hot environment. Of course, after successfully cultivating it, one's palm strength would contain fire poison. Once the fire poison entered the body, it would continuously corrode the opponent's meridians. It could be said to be extremely vicious. Most importantly, the compatibility between the Poison Fire Palm and the 6 Yang Palm was extremely high. Leng Shiqi was confident that he could fuse them together. Thinking that he had earned 2 level 2 spiritual skills for free, Leng Shiqi felt relieved. He immediately walked out of the Spirit Cultivator Business Street and prepared to go to the Een Wind Ridge branch to submit the mission. However, not long after he walked out of the Spirit Cultivator Business Street, his body suddenly paused. He turned his head to look at a shop on the right. It was Mao Kai's coffin shop. Leng Shiqi thought to himself, so this guy actually opened the coffin shop here. No wonder he was able to collect so much information. At this moment, Mao Kai happened to see Leng Shiqi as soon as he appeared in the shop. He hurriedly gave Leng Shiqi a few glances and then entered the house. Leng Shiqi narrowed his eyes. Then he took a big detour and quietly snuck into the coffin shop. Mao Kai was shocked when he saw Leng Shiqi suddenly appear in the coffin shop. However, he didn't ask much and immediately said with an anxious expression, "Envoy, it's not good. Someone wants to harm you." Leng Shiqi's heart moved when he heard this. He couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. He had only been in Shangyang City for 2 days and had barely interacted with anyone who wanted to harm him. However, his heart immediately skipped a beat as he suddenly thought of someone. However, he deliberately asked in a tone of disbelief, "How is that possible? Who would harm me?" "Envoy, it's true," Leng Shiqi said indifferently. "Then tell me who wants to harm me." This envoy, you know, this little one?" Mao Kai rubbed his hands. Leng Shiqi's face turned cold. "Mao Kai, do you think you can get money from me with some groundless information? Besides, I'm about to return to the branch. Even if someone wants to harm me, they won't be able to." Mao Kai was stunned for a moment, then said, "Envoy, this little one can reveal a little to you. Although the person who wants to harm you is in Shangyang City, the method to harm you is outside. As long as the envoy still has to carry out missions in the future, you might fall into a trap." Leng Shiqi saw that Mao Kai didn't seem to be lying to him, so he said, "Okay, tell me. As long as the information is true and the price is reasonable, I won't treat you badly." Mao Kai's face immediately bloomed like a chrysanthemum. However, he immediately said solemnly, "Envoy, the person who wants to harm you is Shangyang City's City Lord Chu Xinran." Chapter 147. In the coffin shop, Leng Shiqi listened to Mao Kai's narration, and the more he listened, the more shocked he became. What Mao Kai said was exactly what Chu Xinran told Jianghu after Leng Shiqi left. After connecting all of this together, Leng Shiqi finally understood that the person who asked the Bloodcloth Pavilion to assassinate Bao Pingyi was Chu Xinran. Maybe when I went to find Chu Xinran, he had already guessed my identity, so he agreed to my request so easily, Leng Shiqi thought to himself, and at the same time he knew where he had miscalculated. He had never thought that his employer was Chu Xinran. Since the Bloodcloth Pavilion strictly kept the identity of the employer a secret, he had never thought about who the employer was from the beginning, which led him to step into Chu Xinran's plan step by step. In the end, Chu Xinran transferred all the resentment of the Heavenly Cloud Tower to him. I actually became a scapegoat. Leng Shiqi could not help but feel resentful. Since he came to this world, he had never been schemed against like this. However, this incident also reminded him that although he had schemed against others on the Blood Fog Island before, his opponents were all young teenagers. Even if some of them were very mature, they were still ignorant of the world. Leng Shiqi, who had lived 2 lives, could easily guess their thoughts. However, now that he had come to the Great Thousand World, the opponents he faced were far from comparable to the teenagers on the Blood Fog Island. It was not only the difference in cultivation realm, but also the difference in scheming and shrewdness. Leng Shiqi secretly decided to be more careful in the future, but he immediately thought of another question. How did Mao Kai know about this? And he knew so clearly? He looked at Mao Kai coldly. Mao Kai smiled and said, "Ambassador, the source of this information is absolutely reliable, so you can rest assured. It's a pity that after I got the news last night I couldn't find you. Now that Jianghu has run away overnight, I'm afraid we can't catch up with him." Even if he did not say it, Leng Shiqi could guess most of it. Mao Kai probably had spies among the city guards. "Your information is indeed very valuable to me. Tell me, how much do you want?" Leng Shiqi admitted that he was a little careless this time. Fortunately, Mao Kai was well informed. Otherwise, it would be a big problem if he encountered people from Tianyun Tower in the future. When Mao Kai heard that he was going to pay, his 2 little eyes immediately narrowed into slits. This lowly one has always been honest with both the old and the young. Furthermore, this lowly one has specially informed the esteemed envoy of the news. This lowly one is showing his sincerity. As you know, this lowly one has to support all the informants in Shangyang City. That's not a small sum of money. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi saw that he wanted to continue being long-winded, so he interrupted, "Just tell me how much it is." Mao Kai didn't say anything. Instead, he stuck out a finger and looked at Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi chuckled and threw out 2 spirit stones. Mao Kai immediately caught the spirit stones and his eyes lit up. However, he hesitated when he picked up the 2nd spirit stone and said, "Esteemed envoy, this?" Leng Shiqi said coldly, "I want all the information about Chu Xinran." When Mao Kai heard this, he seemed to have guessed what Leng Shiqi was going to do. He was immediately shocked. "Esteemed envoy, what are you going to do? Don't ask what you shouldn't ask. I just want you to give me information about Chu Xinran. Isn't one spirit stone enough? Mao Kai said hesitantly, but this is against the rules. Leng Shiqi frowned. Mao Kai continued, esteemed envoy, you may not know this, but the intelligence disciples of our sect can only provide information to the esteemed envoys who have a mission. If there is no mission, we are not allowed to disclose information at will. After all, we are serving the sect, not selling information. Leng Shiqi understood after hearing this, but he didn't care about this at this time. He said directly, since there are sect rules, I won't make things difficult for you. However, rules are dead and people are alive. Do you want to return this spirit stone to me? Mao Kai's hand holding the spirit stone began to tremble. There was a look of struggle in his eyes. In the end, he handed the spirit stone over and said, forgive me, but I can't break the sect rules. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi was a little surprised. He could see that Mao Kai was really a person who loved money as much as his life, but such a person was actually so conservative. What an interesting person. Leng Shiqi thought to himself. He then said, you are really loyal to the sect, but I also accepted the mission to assassinate Chu Xinran. Esteemed envoy, please don't bully me. I have never received any information about this. Leng Shiqi sat on the chair next to him and said slowly, I don't have any information now, but I can find someone to go to the blood clothing pavilion with the spirit stone and issue the mission to assassinate Chu Xinran. Then I will accept it myself. It's just a matter of making 2 more trips. At that time, I will still come to you to ask for information. Unfortunately, most of the reward will be taken by the sect and I will lose out. If I lose out, so be it. As long as I can kill Chu Xinran, I will accept it. Unfortunately, I'm afraid someone won't even get half a spirit stone. After hearing these words, Mao Kai was a little stunned. He really didn't expect Leng Shiqi to think of such a loophole. He still hesitated and said, although that is the case, but, seeing that Mao Kai was still hesitating, Leng Shiqi took out 9 spirit stones from his mustard seed bag and placed them on the table. These spirit stones looked crystal clear and faintly emitted a faint spirit light. It was very eye-catching. Leng Shiqi said, instead of losing the spirit stones to the sect, it is better to give them to people who need them more. It saves me from making 2 more trips. What do you think? Leng Shiqi's words were like the last straw that finally crushed Mao Kai's psychological defense. Mao Kai gritted his teeth and said quietly, deal. But esteemed envoy, you must not leak this matter. Otherwise, I will die even if I have 10 heads. Don't worry, I understand, Leng Shiqi replied seriously. Mao Kai looked at the 9 spirit stones on the table and said, okay, please wait a moment. Not long after, Mao Kai brought over 2 pieces of information. Leng Shiqi opened them and quickly read them. During this time, his eyes flashed with killing intent. Soon Leng Shiqi walked out of the coffin shop. At this time, Mao Kai suddenly pounced on the table and stuffed the spirit stones into his arms. His face was full of smiles, but as he took them, he muttered, I didn't break the rules, I didn't break the rules. When he finished taking all the spirit stones, an extremely soft sound suddenly came from the next room, but he was still keenly aware of it. He immediately stopped smiling and walked to the side room. Then he opened a secret passage and took out a piece of information. Urgent information? Mao Kai opened it and took a look. His face immediately changed and he shouted, not good, esteemed envoy, come back quickly. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.